Welcome to Air Checks. This episode and next episode is dedicated to the men and women that served our countries for Armistice Day, or what people in the USA call it as Veterans Day. If you are a veteran, thank you for serving. Soldiers of the Press is a war drama that was created in New York and syndicated by World Broadcasting System. Little is known about the series or the total number of episodes. Each episode is 15 minutes long and retold a recent news story from action during World War II. The series was narrated by United Press correspondents including Walter Cronkite, Harrison Salisbury, and many lesser known such as Ralph Teasdale and N. Stringer. The show was broadcast on war from February 28, 1943 until August 5, 1945 on Sundays at 12:30 p.m. There are at least 39 episodes in circulation out of the 148 known to exist. We're not going to play all of the episodes, but you can download the existing episodes from archive.org. Here is the first set for Of Soldiers of the Press.
Welcome to this radio series brought to you by the Old Time Radio Researchers Group at Yahoo. If you enjoy old time radio, then we know you will enjoy this specially prepared series. The Old Time Radio Researchers Group is a group of avid fans and listeners of classic radio from the golden age of radio. Our mission is to preserve old-time radio programs from the classic period of radio drama, comedy, and variety programming for future generations to enjoy. To accomplish this, we have three groups comprised of over 1,600 volunteers from 14 different countries that are working hard to preserve our radio heritage. There are thousands of radio series and hundreds of thousands of episodes existing today. They exist on the original transcription discs from the time of the show's initial broadcast, or on reel-to-reel tapes, or on cassette tapes. The introduction of digital technology has greatly changed the hobby. We are now able to encode from the aforementioned media to several different digital formats, including the most popular, which is MP3. Having the benefit of this technology enables us to actually enhance and improve the sound quality of a given show. It also provides a better way to preserve these shows. Prior to digital technology, these radio shows were, and still are, subject to the extinction by the ravages of time. Transcription discs as well as tapes eventually deteriorate. We now have the means to store these shows on hard drives, CDs, and DVDs. Of course, CDs and DVDs are not infallible or impervious to time, but they are certainly more convenient. Thanks to digital technology, classic shows from the old-time radio period are now widely available and easily accessible in both CDA and MP3 format. This explosion of availability has brought with it many problems. An abundance of MP3 files are incorrectly named or poorly encoded. Today's technology enables these errors to be rapidly and widely distributed. The goal of the Radio Researchers Group is to correct these widespread errors and to produce both series and logs of broadcast dates and titles as accurately as we can. The volunteer researchers in our group scour both the web and offline sources in order to bring together all known episodes of a series. Episodes are collected and then reviewed to make sure that they are genuine, accurate, and of good listening quality. Additionally, we prepare audio briefs that will give you a history of the series and of the stars. Also included are CD labels that have been specially designed for each particular series. When the group has finished researching a series, we will certify the series is accurate, meaning that the episodes in the series are all correctly dated and titled. In addition, when all the available episodes are included in a series, then the series will receive the higher level of certification of complete. We host three groups on Yahoo to accomplish these goals. First is the Old Time Radio Researchers Group, where most of the work goes on. In this group, members bring together information on series, locate new series and episodes, and assign various series to people to compile. The second group is the OTR project, which serves to work on broadcast logs of individual series for use in conjunction with the management tool software called Otter. In this group, a database of series broadcast logs are prepared, maintained, and constantly updated. This database is also available for download on our website. New series are added on a frequent basis. At the time of this recording, the database has information on over 1,700 distinct series and over 156,000 individual episodes. Our third group, the OTRR Distro Group, serves as a distribution point where we freely make our premier series available to all who would like to have them. Please note that we prepare all our series for free distribution. So if you purchase this series, the seller obtained it through fraudulent methods. We would appreciate any information that you can furnish us concerning anyone selling Old Time Radio Researchers prepared series. We make no charge for our work and do not intend for anyone to profit from the hundreds of hours our members have put into researching and preparing these series. If you'd like to join our group, or just receive old-time radio series that have been tested for accuracy and dependability, please visit our website for more information. Our website is located at www.otrr.org. That's www.otrr.org. Or you can go to www.yahoo.com and do a search under the group section for Old Time Radio Researchers. For the Old Time Radio Researchers Group, I'm Andrew Cernicos, your announcer. Thanks for listening, and now, on with the show.
Soldiers of the Press. Shoulder to shoulder with the men on the fighting fronts of the world go the correspondents of the United Press. You will find them peering down from the bellies of bombers over New Guinea or Kiel, scanning swirling actions in Egypt from the scant cover of foxholes, or from baking, bruising tanks. You will find them on the bridges and sky controls of cruisers and carriers off Midway and Wake and Malta, or sharing a lookout's watch aboard a convoy ship, heading blindly through the Arctic dark for Murmansk. With the troops they accompany, these correspondents face every peril of war, gunfire, capture, and pestilence.
Soldiers of the Press is a war drama that was created in New York and syndicated by World Broadcasting System. Little is known about the series or the total number of episodes. Each episode is 15 minutes long and retold a recent news story from action during World War II. The series was narrated by United Press correspondents including Walter Cronkite, Harrison Salisbury, and many lesser knowns such as Ralph Teasdale and Ann Stringer. The show was broadcast on WOR from 28 February 1943 until 5 August 1945 on Sunday at 12:30 p.m. There are at least 39 episodes in circulation out of the 148 known to exist. For the Old Time Radio Researchers, I'm Clyde J. Kell, your announcer. Now on with the show.
Soldiers of the Press. Soldiers of the Press. Shoulder to shoulder with the men on the fighting fronts of the world go the correspondents of the United Press. You will find them peering down from the bellies of bombers over New Guinea or Kiel, scanning swirling actions in Egypt from the scant cover of foxholes, or from baking, bruising tanks. You will find them on the bridges and sky controls of cruisers and carriers off Midway and Wake and Malta, or sharing a lookout's watch aboard a convoy ship, heading blindly through the Arctic dark for Murmansk. With the troops they accompany, these correspondents face every peril of war, gunfire, capture, and pestilence, hardship, tension, and tedium. Theirs is a vital wartime task, to observe and report to you developments on the battlefronts. Report them clearly, completely, quickly. Among the hundreds of United Press correspondents fulfilling this important mission is Henry T. Gorell. Our story of his recent adventures is the story behind a communique issued by United States Heavy Bombardment Air Force Base somewhere in the Middle East.
In an attack on enemy shipping in Navarino Bay, planes of the U.S. Army Air Force damaged 2 large supply-laden cargo vessels, causing violent explosions attended by fires.
That was the terse account of that action contained in the official announcement. But to United Press correspondent Henry Gorell, there was much more to the story than that. For Gorell rode in one of those bombers over Navarino Bay.
Yes, I was in one of those big 4-motored consolidated B-24s and saw them give the Germans a taste of America's fighting power. And I can tell you that every American has a right to be proud of the men and machines of war we're turning against our enemies. But that's getting ahead of my story. You see, I've been covering the war since it began. I've seen German planes and tanks and infantry roll across Poland, the Low Countries, France, Eastern Europe. I accompanied the British Expeditionary Force that attempted to go to the aid of Greece, and I retreated with them to Egypt under a hail of bombs from Nazi Stukas. More recently, I've been stationed at a United States Heavy Bombardment Air Force base in the Middle East. Can't tell you just where. The one thing I'd been hoping for was an opportunity to go along when American bombers and American bombs blasted some of the swagger out of Hitler's supermen. Well, my chance came unexpectedly late one afternoon. I was in my quarters pounding away on my typewriter when... Okay, come in.
Are you Henry Gorell of the United Press?
Oh, hi there, soldier. Yes, I'm Gorell. What can I do for you?
Major Parham's compliments, sir. He asked me to deliver this message to you and to tell you it's urgent.
Oh, thanks. Just a minute. Let's see if there's a reply. Arrangements completed. Correspondents accompany massed bombing force attack mission. Man, this is what I've been waiting for. Report to briefing room at 4:50. Hey, that gives me just about 20 minutes. Tell the Major I'll be there with bells.
Yes, sir.
Oh, Ed, they finally set it up for some correspondents to go along on a mass bombing raid. Look, I got a story in the mail here. It's complete. See that it gets to the censor's office pronto, will you?
Sure thing. Good luck, Hank.
And Joe, you'll have to fork over those wool socks you borrowed. When I reached the operations office, I found the briefing room packed with young, alert American flyers, enough of them to indicate that the show was going to be a big one. Their faces were grimly serious. They were listening to a lieutenant who was pointing out their objectives on a huge map. I recognized the outlines of the coast of Greece. The lieutenant said,
"Your target is a concentration of enemy shipping in Navarino Bay, in here. Intelligence informs us the Germans have considerable anti-aircraft strength concentrated in the areas marked in red, here and here. Now, you'll undoubtedly encounter considerable flak. The enemy also has a force of fighter craft in the area, so you'll have to be on the lookout for pursuits. The order in which you'll take off and go over the target is listed on the blackboard outside the operations room."
while the bomber crews assembled additional data on weather, the types of anti-aircraft and pursuits to be encountered, I inspected that blackboard. It was a screwy-looking list. Planes affectionately named the Jersey Jerks, Snow White, the Witch, and a half a dozen tough dwarfs. The Witch was scheduled to take off last. Her pilot was Lieutenant Glade Jorgensen. I knew him slightly. A blond, husky, square-jawed trombone player from American Fork, Utah. As the crews began moving out of the briefing line to the line of jeeps waiting outside, I singled him out. "Hello, Lieutenant. Think perhaps you'll remember me, Henry Gorell of the United Press. I'd like to make this trip with your crew."
Gorell? Oh, sure, I remember you. You went with that British convoy to Malta a while back. So you want to go over with me, eh?
Right.
Look, have you had a good view of the blackboard there?
Yeah, I did.
We're to be last over the target, you know. The Jerrys will have everything they can throw at us in action by the time we go in.
Yes, I know, but I'd still like to make the hop in your plane. May be a bit more dangerous, but it's a cinch to provide the best view of the show.
Like that, huh?
Like that.
Okay, I suppose you know your business. You'll fly with the Witch, then.
Swell.
Well, you may as well come along with me and get acquainted with the rest of the crew.
I meet them, 9 in all. Every man trained in teamwork like members of a champion football squad. There's Norman Frost, the former Miami bellboy, third gunner on our B-24. Second Lieutenant Peter L. Vlahakis of Newark, New Jersey, our navigator. Co-pilot Lieutenant Robert T. Goldberg of Blooming Prairie, Minnesota. Bombardier Second Lieutenant Henry M. Spanger of Mount Airy, North Carolina. Staff Sergeant Joseph T. Byrne from La Crosse, Wisconsin, our radio operator and a gunner. Tail gunner Staff Sergeant Donald S. Allen of New York. Marvin Breeding, armored gunner from Dallas, Texas, and Technical Sergeant Joseph E. Farmer of St. Charles, Virginia. We pile into the waiting jeeps, which jolt us out to where the big bombers are moored at dispersal points around the field. I spot the witch, looking anything but warlike in her coat of salmon pink camouflage. Her name is lettered boldly in her sides. Ground crews already have her motors turning over. I can feel a tightening sensation in my throat and stomach. I'm handed a cumbersome, heavy flying suit, life jacket, parachute, and oxygen mask, and we're about ready to take off. Duchess, the little dog mascot of the Jersey Jerks, is going to have to stay behind. She's done a lot of flying since they found her in Lakeland, Florida, but there are no oxygen masks for dogs. It's our turn now, and we scramble aboard.
Well, Gorell, we must be getting near the coast of Greece. Can you feel us start to climb? Jorgensen must be going up to our bombing level.
We're putting on altitude, all right. My ears just popped.
You better get your life jacket adjusted and put on your helmet. By the way, the earphones inside the helmet are connected with the interphone. You'll be able to keep tabs on everything that's going on.
That's swell. This is the way it goes on?
That's it. And here's your speaker. Well, I'll have to be getting back to my station now. Bye.
Thanks, and good luck. Hello? Hello? Am I cut in an interphone all right?
You're present and accounted for, Gorell. We're climbing several hundred feet a minute. Altitude now 10,000 feet. Put on your oxygen masks.
Now look, I can see Greece. Those peninsulas look like jagged fingers.
You're right. Gunners, better fire a few practice bursts. We're getting in close.
Okay, top, sir.
Tail to, sir.
All set here.
Look sharp below and to our right, Gorell. Those pencil stubs are the German ships. There goes the flak. See those white puffballs ahead? It won't be long now.
Kane to Jorgensen. Pursuit's approaching.
I say them, sir.
3 of them in our starboard quarter.
Now we've lost them. The Jersey Jerk's having a go at them.
Get set, men. Snow White has dropped her bombs. We're going in now.
Navigator to Bombardier. Target coming up. Shall I open the doors to the bomb bay?
Okay, Pete. Open them.
Your ship, Hank, and make 'em count. We'll be on target in about 70 seconds.
Level her off. Steady now. 3 points starboard. Hold her steady. There. Bombs away.
They're right on the target. Boy, look at those explosions.
There come a couple of pursuits coming up from about 15,000 feet. Let 'em have it, boys. We're losing altitude. I'll try and shake 'em.
Here comes another one on our tail. For God's sakes, open fire.
I got him, sir.
You got him, Frost? You got that plane?
Yes, sir, I'm sure I did. Yes, there he goes now. He's on fire. I've been hit, sir.
You hurt bad, Frost?
Yes, sir, I'm afraid I am. I'm bleeding pretty bad. But I got him, sir.
Fine business. Hold tight. I'll come back as soon as I can and help you. May as well chuck your oxygen masks. Our oxygen tank's been hit.
The pursuits have given up now, sir.
Good, good. We're heading for home.
This is Gorell. I'll go back and give Frost a hand. I make my way back to the gunner's turret. I have to take off my parachute harness, life jacket, and sheepskin coat to negotiate the narrow catwalk in the bomb bay. It's Frost, our second gunner, who's been hit. Our waist gunner already is bending over him. Together we unlace his shoe, cut his trouser leg, and rip off his sock. It's a knee wound. We apply a tourniquet. My fingers are numb with cold. We're still at high altitude. My first aid kit's flaked with frost, and the iodine swab's so frozen I have to breathe on it to thaw it out. After we've made the second gunner comfortable, Breeding, the waist gunner, turns to me and says,
Would you mind looking at my leg, sir? I think I've been hit, too.
I take a quick look at it. He has a flesh wound in his ankle, but he's kept quiet until we're sure the second gunner's all right. The sun's been setting as we work, and I suddenly look out to realize that it's dark. It's a reassuring feeling. Jorgensen's trying to get up speed. He tells us 2 superchargers have been shot away. The automatic steering gear is out. The self-sealing gas tank's been hit, and an aileron's been knocked off. Engineer thinks we also may have a flat tire. From where I sit, I count 25 cannon and bullet holes inside the plane. The crew adds up its score. We got another German plane in addition to the ship down by Frost. Technical Sergeant Farmer turns up. He's been hit by shrapnel, but luckily suffered only a scratch under his right eye. Everyone begins to relax. Jorgensen tells us we're getting close to our base. Everybody smiles. Our radio is barking out into the dark.
Wounded aboard. Have medical aid ready. Wounded aboard. Have medical aid ready.
Searchlights finally catch us. We flash the recognition signal, and the gun batteries below hold their fire. Our wheels touch ground. Everyone is tense. But our tire isn't flat after all. A welcome feeling. An ambulance is on hand. Doctors look at Frost's knee and say he'll be all right soon. I'm back with the story of the first mass bombing raid by American planes, on which American correspondents were permitted to accompany our planes. Everyone is tired. Everyone's glad to be back. And everyone has work to do. The crew pile into jeeps to return to operations headquarters to make out their reports. Mentally, I start putting the lead for my story into shape.
Yes, the official communique said merely, in an attack on enemy shipping in Navarino Bay, planes of the U.S. Army Air Force damaged 2 large supply-laden cargo vessels, causing violent explosions attended by fires. But to correspondent Henry T. Gorell, it was the story of the heroism of a former bellboy from Miami who kept firing in spite of a severe wound until the attacking German pursuit plunged earthward. A story of American-built planes that took all the Nazis could give and came home safely. By braving enemy gunfire, by accompanying our troops, our ships, and our planes into battle at the risk of their lives and freedom, Gorell and other correspondents of the United Press enable American radio listeners and newspaper readers to know the facts, the truth of important war actions clearly, completely, quickly. They bring you the stories behind the headlines. So listen for United Press News on the air. Look for it in your local newspaper. It is your guarantee of the world's best coverage of the world's biggest news. Soldiers of the Press.
He has been on raids with Marine Colonel Merritt A. Edson. He has been shelled by destroyers, cruisers, and submarines. He has endured with the rest of us our daily bombing raids. He has lived a Marine's life under jungle conditions. Robert C. Miller is a good Marine.
That is a Marine's tribute to a newspaper man. They are the words of Major General Alexander A. Vandergrift, commander of U.S. Marine forces at Guadalcanal. Robert C. Miller, soldier of the press, is a United Press war correspondent accredited to the United States Pacific Fleet. Disregarding all personal risks, Miller accompanied American forces which launched the first great Allied offensive in the Pacific. He landed with them on the hostile beach of Guadalcanal early last August, and ignoring warnings of grave danger and recommendations that he withdraw, chose to remain there during the first 6 bitter weeks of U.S. occupation of those inhospitable islands. We recreate for you his story of the adventure, the action, the heroism that lie behind the official communiques, as Miller recorded it for United Press in his Guadalcanal notebook.
Yes, I'm a war correspondent. 6 months ago, I was working in the Los Angeles Bureau of United Press, where I got my assignments neatly written out on a slip of paper, or from a UP bureau manager who would tell me, grab yourself a cab and beat it over to 20th and Pine Streets. Some dame has barricaded herself in her apartment and is threatening to shoot the cops. With a correspondent assigned to the fleet, it's different. You never know where you're going or what your story will be. In fact, you may accept a 3 weeks assignment with a task force and come back with nothing to show for it but a pair of sea legs. Then again, you may find all hell breaking loose around your ears at any minute. I'd arrived in Honolulu, complete with uniform and a green armband with a large white C, which marked me for war correspondent. I was itching for a chance to see some action, but for weeks nothing happened. Then one afternoon I was called to the phone by a Navy officer who told me to report to him in sea gear within the hour. I tossed my clothes together hurriedly and soon was clambering up the ladder of a warship.
Your credentials, sir?
Oh, certainly. Here you are. Miller's the name. Robert C. Miller of United Press.
Uh-huh. Well, let's see now. Well, these seem to be in order. Oh, yes, I have you listed. This way, please, and I'll take you to the officer of the deck.
Thanks, I'm right with you.
Here we are. Sir, this is Robert Miller of United Press, accredited to the fleet and assigned to this unit of the task force. His credentials are in order, sir.
How do you do, Miller? I'm glad to know you. I'm glad to have you with us.
Well, thank you. I'm glad to be with you, too. By the way, I wonder if it's possible yet to give me some idea of what sort of an assignment I'm on. It's my first time out, you know.
I'm sorry, Miller, but all I can tell you at this point is that we are a task force on a secret mission. But it might make you feel better to know that the chances are you'll see some action. You'll be given full details in due time. Here you are, Miller. These are your quarters. Supply officer will look in on you shortly to fit you out with steel helmet, life jacket, gas mask, and other gear. Well, we're getting underway. I'll have to be off now, but I'll look in on you again after mess. Best of luck, Miller.
Thanks for everything. Good luck to you, too, sir. Here's hoping your predictions pan out that we'll see action.
For days, the task force plowed through the Pacific under a blazing sun. An air of tense expectancy filled the ship. The equator was crossed, and Miller was transformed from a pollywog to a shellback. It's a ceremony performed with barrel staves for those aboard who are entering the southern hemisphere for the first time. Miller wrote the next day's entries in his notebook standing up. The task force put in at a South Pacific island for supplies and reinforcements. Speculation mounted. Then Miller wrote this entry in his notebook.
They came today. Additional reinforcements. What a sight. Ship after ship popped out of the horizon this afternoon until the whole ocean seemed a mass of ships. There's no doubt about it now. Something big is in the wind. I've been put aboard a transport loaded with Marines. I'm all ears. It's 8 bells. The captain is to make an announcement over the public address system.
Gentlemen, you're all aware from the strength of our forces that we're bound on an important mission. I now am at liberty to tell you that our objective is in the Solomon Islands. Our mission is to drive out the occupying Japanese forces and plant the United States flag over those strategic bases. Details of the attack will be explained to all battalion commanders tonight in the ready room.
Won't be long now. A murky haze is providing a welcome screen for the invasion armada. Everyone seems to be in good spirits. There's little conversation about tomorrow. Nearly everyone's talking about home. If they aren't talking about it, they're thinking about it. I've noticed quite a few Marines topside, just leaning over the rail and thinking. General quarters sounds at 4 a.m. A hell of an hour to go to war. We have steak, potatoes, and eggs for breakfast. I notice everyone is feeding himself forcibly, but everyone fills up. The next meal may be a long time coming. All officers are decked out in green, indistinguishable from a private's uniform, and all insignia of rank have been hidden. I understand the Japs give 10 extra points for shooting an officer. Well, I'm putting my green armband in my pocket. Who knows, they may give 15 points extra for bagging a correspondent. I join a group of Marine officers on the signal deck.
Hello, Miller. Have a nice breakfast?
Yeah, just swell. I couldn't taste anything, but I can tell there's something in my stomach. Butterflies, maybe, or possibly my heart.
Well, don't worry. You're not the only one with the jitters. It's this waiting that gets you. You'll be all right when the shooting starts.
Yeah, this is all going off too smoothly to suit me. I hope it doesn't turn out to be a trap.
Say, I can make out a dark outline off there to the right.
That's right. That's our objective, Guadalcanal.
Hey, look up ahead there. A light.
Yeah, it's the signal from the ship ahead for us to anchor. The unbelievable has happened. We're in, and the Japs haven't spotted us.
Hey, what's that?
Oh, relax. That's one of our own planes catapulting into the air. Brother, there's going to be another blitz like Pearl Harbor, but this time the Japs will be on the receiving end.
There's the curtain raiser. The show's on.
Man, look at those explosions on the beach.
There go our boats and tank lighters over the side. Let's go, men.
2 loaded. Cut her away. Over the side.
Listen to those leathernecks whooping up.
Okay, Miller, it's no concert. Down the rope ladder and into the boat with you.
Me? Okay, I'm right with you. This business of loading reminds me of the subways. You pack them in, slam the door, and ready for the next one, huh? The landing boats circle the ships, waiting for the 0 hour, while our barrage mounts to even greater fury. Finally, the bombardment lets up and the first boats race shoreward. I watch through glasses as the first of them hit the beach and the tiny figures race inland. I notice that the ones that fall get up and run on, a reassuring indication that possibly there's not much enemy resistance. Now it's our turn. The bow of the landing boat rises high as the coxswain guns her wide open and aims for the palm-studded beach. We catch sight of a signal indicating landing successful. I'm poised in the bow of the boat, surveying landing possibilities when we run aground. Someone gives me a shove, and I land waist-deep in the surf. There's a precarious split second as I waver between a landing and a dunking. With a magnificent recovery, I manage to stumble up to the beach and dive for the nearest thicket. A good lesson for a newspaperman in that first landing. Never get in the bow of a landing boat. It puts you in the embarrassing position of leading the charge up the beach, totally unarmed.
August 8th. Night has settled down over the rugged islands for the second time since the Marines set foot on its soil. Nerves are taut. Japanese warships are reported moving in on Guadalcanal. Everyone knows the Japs are going to attack. The convoy rides at anchor in Lunga Bay, spewing out its troops and supplies for the Solomons invasion. 20 miles away, the little American and Australian fleet stands guard. Night falls, black, sudden, tropical night. A Japanese plane drones overhead, and the dark is cut through with flares. Miller watches from Guadalcanal Beach. In his own words,
in the cold, drizzling rain, I stand and watch the grand and terrible night battle between United States and Australian warships and a Japanese fleet. Almost at the instant the flares spread their cold glare across the black of the sea, mushrooms of yellow flame belch out of the west. Seconds later, the first rumble of the cannonading reaches the beach where the Marines and I stand silently, watching the warships pour their tons of steel at each other. Searchlights run their long white fingers through the night. We stand awestruck. Suddenly, an Australian cruiser, the Canberra, bursts into flame with a roar of explosions that drowns out the guns. Other explosions follow from other ships. We can't tell whose. There is a tremendous roar from the eastern end of the strait, and someone shouts that the Astoria and Vincennes, American cruisers, are afire. They're going to their deaths at full speed, straight into the face of the enemy. Minutes seem like hours. Finally, the gunfire dwindles, stops. The flares sizzle out in the sea. The battle is over, and the most important convoy, possibly, that the United States ever sent out has been saved. The Japanese have been beaten, and the Marines are on Guadalcanal.
Next day, Miller established what he described as the first United Press Bureau on Guadalcanal, an assortment of crates and boxes of captured Japanese foodstuffs, which were moved into headquarters tent. Of his handiwork, Miller said,
"It's not much to look at, but it does give support to your correspondent's typewriter and backsides."
Later that afternoon, Miller and Sherman Montrose, a photographer for Acme News Pictures, accepted an opportunity to accompany a patrol into the jungle.
Hey, Miller, that patrol's moving on ahead. Come on, let's get a move on.
Oh, that's the trouble with you photographers, Monty. You've no curiosity. You want somebody to strike a pose for you so you can click your shutter and move on.
Well, what do you see that's so interesting? I don't see anything here that'll enable you to burn up the cables.
Look, off left there.
Huh?
That looks like a couple of abandoned Jap tents. Come on, let's go over.
Ah, nuts. I got a camera full of pictures of Jap tents.
Here's a Jap machine gun. Looks like somebody left in a hurry. Say, Monty, there's a dead Jap in this tent. Hey, Monty, he ain't dead. That Jap is alive. Hey, Lieutenant.
Hey, you guys with the guns.
We got a live Jap prisoner here. Well, that's the way Montrose and I managed to capture the first Jap prisoner taken on Guadalcanal Island, amply reinforced by a company of Marines. I have to admit it scared me out of 10 years' growth. But before Francis McCarthy arrived at Guadalcanal to relieve me 6 weeks later, that experience seemed tame. I managed to be shot at, and fortunately missed, by just about every weapon the Japanese possess, with the possible exception of 1 or 2 experimental jobs that they hadn't brought down to the Guadalcanal proving ground. Included were all types of naval craft, 75-millimeter artillery, machine guns, both light and heavy, mortars, also light and heavy. Then there were bombs, in sizes ranging from 1,000-pounders to the 250-pound so-called grass cutters. But my personal nomination for the height of human misery is to lie in the jungle, wringing wet, in a tropical downpour, while snipers' bullets whine past your head or plop themselves in the trees near you. You get the feeling that those .25 caliber rifle bullets have been cast in Japan for you individually and are being delivered personally by a little fella high in the timber above, behind, or beside you. You never do find out just where the hell he is.
Yes, in the words of Major General Alexander A. Vandergrift, Robert C. Miller is a good Marine. And Robert C. Miller is likewise a good reporter, conscientious, accurate, true to the finest traditions of American journalism. He is one of hundreds of such men on the worldwide staff of the United Press. We will be back soon with another of these stories of the correspondents who gather and write the news for this station. Be sure to listen. And meanwhile, remember to listen for United Press news on the air. Look for it in your favorite newspaper. It's your guarantee of the world's best coverage of the world's biggest news. Soldiers of the Press.
With the British Eighth Army in Egypt.
At an Allied advanced base in Libya.
Those are datelines all of you have seen in your newspapers or heard on the air. And many of you undoubtedly are familiar with the name of the man whose byline appears above many of those stories. The man whose story we bring you now, Richard D. McMillan, United Press staff correspondent accredited to the British Eighth Army in North Africa. McMillan has seen and reported action on 6 fronts of the present war: Paris, the Low Countries, London, Gibraltar. He saw the British fleet smash Italy's navy at Taranto. Then came assignments to Cairo, to Albania. In Greece, McMillan teamed with UP correspondent Henry Gorell to scoop the world with the first vivid eyewitness story of the British withdrawal. For the past 2 years, he has reported brilliantly on the seesaw battle for control of North Africa.
I'm what my front office likes to refer to as a veteran war reporter. Well, looking back over the past 3 years, I guess the description fits. But my own impression is that I'm more of a veteran sandhog. You see, I followed virtually every drive across Egypt and Libya in both directions since the Germans and Italians elected to make the North African desert a battlefield. I've eaten sand with my food and cursed it, and I've burrowed into it for safety from enemy shells and thanked God for it many a time in the past 2 years. But that's a long story. So suppose we start with June 27th, 1942. That's a date that will stick in my memory for a long time. I had followed the British winter drive that pushed past Benghazi and had managed a narrow escape from capture at Tobruk when Field Marshal Rommel started rolling the Eighth Army back toward the Libyan border. The night of June 27th, I was at Matruh, well inside Egypt. The British had been under constant pressure for days. Our position was endangered, and I could hear the rumble of an artillery duel only a few miles away. But I fell into an exhausted sleep in a field truck. A British soldier put an abrupt end to my nap.
McMillan, Mac, old fellow, wake up.
Oh, go away.
Come out of it, man. Wake up and listen.
Hey, what's the idea?
See here, Mac, I'm sorry I had to clip you a bit to get you awake, but we've got to be on the move. We're abandoning Matruh.
Abandoning Matruh?
I'm afraid that's how it's got to be if we're to avoid another Tobruk. Jerry's all but have us bottled up as it is. Our mechanized forces are fighting their way through the enemy columns to join the main army. There isn't much time.
Okay, what are we waiting for? Let's get going.
Right you are. Just let me get under the wheel of this lorry. We'll pick up a couple of other newspaper laddies and we'll be on the way. That's it.
We sped off under cover of darkness, joining other men and equipment that had been moving out as I slept. Soon we began meeting tanks. Tanks going faster than I believed a tank could move, racing along the road westward from Alexandria to join the battle. The air was choked with dust. We came upon a tank stopped beside the road for repairs. We drew up to have a chat with a young British tank officer. He said,
"The evacuation of Matruh is a bad blow. It puts the entrance to the corridor leading along the coastal highway toward Alexandria into the hands of Rommel. Mark my words, we'll get him yet."
Through the bitter days that followed, that statement kept ringing in my ears. We will get him yet. It was typical of the spirit I found everywhere expressed by Britain's hard-pressed troops. Still, we continued falling back. Back past Fuka, past El Daba, then the Libyan plateau fell off to the Qattara Depression, and the British decided to make a stand at El Alamein, guarding the narrow corridor between the sea and the impassable depression.
On June 30th, Rommel's Africa Corps struck. Correspondent Macmillan watched from the front lines as contact was established between British forward forces and enemy light scouting units along the road west of El Alamein. The big battle for Alexandria and the Nile was underway. That night, Macmillan wrote,
Field Marshal Erwin Rommel, commander of the Axis forces, knows that victory is in his grasp, if he can hold it. He is aware that if he delays, he may lose it. He also must be fully aware that if he is over hasty, he may run into disaster. He has struck. Are the British ready for him? All I can say is that on the front line, the British think so. The Imperial forces are convinced that they are going to fight this time to a finish.
Those were prophetic words, for the British did hold at El Alamein. They held, and Correspondent Macmillan spent the succeeding weeks at the front, sharing the lot of the defending British forces, dodging shells and bombs, and fighting the desert's constant scourge of flies and ants. He ate his share of sand, and in the process, he became aware of a growing spirit of determination and self-assurance among the British forces.
Through July and August, the British adopted the slogan, hit the enemy and hit him hard wherever you find him. The expression, brassing the enemy up, the British equivalent of giving him the business, was on everybody's lips. I think the best illustration of what I mean occurred one night in mid-July. The desert silence was suddenly broken at about midnight by bursting flares and the distant rattle of machine gun fire. I couldn't sleep, so I went out to have a word with the troops and dropped down beside the crew of a battery of 25-pounders. Hello there. Nice fire you've got going. Mind if I join you? This night air's a bit chilly.
Okay, Governor. Make yourself at home. What's that insignia you're wearing? You're a newspaper man, ain't you?
That's right. My name's Macmillan. Richard Macmillan of United Press.
Glad to know you, sir.
Say, how do you get such a swell fire to burn? There isn't enough vegetation on this entire godforsaken desert to make a respectable bonfire.
We're burning the bloomin' sand. The trick is to take an empty petrol tin and fill her up with sand. Then you pour petrol over it, and you got as fine a stove as ever was made in Birmingham.
Hey, that's a good idea.
And it does a right good job frying sausages, too. Here, try one. Well, this bite is done. Now, careful your fingers now.
Say, this is good. You know how to cook these things just right.
Well, I ought to. It's my business. I run a fish and chip shop back home in London.
Oh. Are you getting homesick for London?
I'd like to be home right enough. I can't say I'm exactly homesick.
We've been too busy fighting to talk or think about it. We're just getting on with the war.
Getting on with the war. They were doing that all right. The men of that battery went into action and sent their first shells of the new day screaming through the dawn as we sat there roasting sausages. To a man, those seasoned troops refused to think of anything but getting on with the war. Through August and September, they parried every thrust of Rommel's forces, and one could sense a growing pressure behind our lines. Masses of supplies of men. And overhead, we were becoming increasingly aware of a mounting Allied superiority in the air. American bomber and fighter forces appeared. Then, on the night of October 25th, I was summoned, together with other correspondents, to the headquarters tent of Lieutenant General Bernard L. Montgomery. General Montgomery sat under the marquee of his tent, carefully balancing a fly whisk on his index finger. Then, in a manner as calm as if he were lecturing an army class, he said,
During moonlight tonight, terrific battles will be fought. Terrific. When day breaks tomorrow, we shall see a hot stand. But there is no doubt of the issue. Since the beginning of the war, we and our allies have been plugging holes. Now, it looks as if, with the Americans on our side, we have passed from the defensive to the offensive. So the battle begins tonight. The 8th Army and our air power are one. British troops are first class. All they want is success. Tommy will never let you down.
The offensive begins with the speed of lightning. I scurry from Montgomery's headquarters to join a regiment of Highlanders. The eerie skirl of bagpipes sounds in the chill night, the bright moonlight of the desert. The sound shrills across the minefields to the German lines at Alamein. Suddenly, the pipes are drowned out by the reverberations of the biggest blast the desert ever heard as the British open up with a barrage. The British troops move forward, attacking German positions at many points. Tanks burst through the German outer positions. I am accompanying the units of the 51st Highland Division, which is getting its desert baptism in its first action since it was reformed after the Battle of France. In 2 years of covering Western desert campaigns, I've never seen the British go to battle with such drive, coordination of effort, and meticulous timing. 20 minutes after the first crash of battle, troops with fixed bayonets have filed through the corridors in our minefields and have mopped up enemy forward posts. Everything is going according to plan.
Three nights later, McMillan was witnessing the action from an advanced post in the northern corner of the area where British forces had broken through fixed Nazi defenses. He wrote,
"It looks like a dark hour for Hitler in Africa tonight. I've been watching the battle from an observation post inside a damaged Crusader tank. The post is on what is known as Hill 27. Germans lie dead only a few feet away atop the knoll, and the battlefield all around is strewn with wreckage. German machine gunners and riflemen are sniping at us from dug-in positions only a few hundred yards away. About a mile and a half to the south, a tank battle is being fought in a tornado of sound, volcanoes of smoke, and whirlwinds of dust. It is clear that the entire Eighth Army has the real offensive spirit. It must be clear now, even to the Germans, that this is a bold and vigorous attack, backed by a tremendous weight of arms. But it is still too early to hang out the bunting until Rommel has answered and we know beyond a doubt whether we are able to hold and break his best efforts to retaliate." Well, the answer to that question was not long coming. After more than a week with advance units, I had dropped back to British headquarters to comply with a request from New York for a step-by-step analysis of the action. A courier strode into the press tent and told us that General Montgomery had scheduled a press conference within the hour. I dropped what I was doing and went to the tent which served as his desert headquarters. The weary, desert-begrimed press corps was assembled in the blazing sun. Suddenly, Montgomery stepped through the tent flaps and into the glare. An expectant hush fell over the group. Montgomery cleared his throat and said,
"Gentlemen, we've had a fine battle, and there is no doubt now of the result. Complete and absolute victory. Bosch is completely finished. Some portions of the enemy are struggling to get away, but those portions still facing us in the south will be put in the bag."
Well, you know the rest. The Axis forces were put in the bag. And after 2 years of watching the British buffeted back and forth across the desert, you can bet that I was willing to go on eating sand a little while longer to follow every step of the action.
Correspondent Richard McMillan has seen and written much of history in the making in North Africa, and you can count on ace United Press correspondents like him to bring you speedy, complete news of every phase of war action on the fronts around the world. For these soldiers of the press are on the job around the clock, covering the news wherever it is, wherever it may be. We will be back soon with another story of adventure with United Press correspondents. Be sure to listen. And meanwhile, remember to look for United Press news in your favorite newspaper. Listen for it on the radio. It's your guarantee of the world's best coverage of the world's biggest news. Soldiers of the press. If you have any idea that all a war correspondent has to do is sit at some headquarters table and take down notes from the high command, or ride comfortably in a staff car miles behind the fighting lines, dismiss it. A foreign assignment is a job. Thrilling and exciting, of course, but it's a job after all. And the war correspondents who crouch in the foxholes ride with the bombers, or accompany a task force at sea are expert craftsmen working at one of the most dangerous occupations in the world today. Such a man is United Press correspondent Joe James Custer.
I've been assigned to the Pacific Fleet since a short time after we got into this war. Possibly you may wonder how a fellow gets such an assignment in the first place. Well, to begin with, I've been a newspaper man for a good many years, in San Francisco, and later on a number of newspapers in Hawaii. Matter of fact, I was working for a Honolulu newspaper that Sunday when Jap bombers roared out of the morning mists and unloaded their bombs on Pearl Harbor. From that day on, I knew what I wanted to do. I had met Frank Tremaine, manager of the United Press Bureau in Honolulu, on a number of assignments, so I went to see him in the UP offices in the Honolulu Advertiser building. I found him hard at work at his typewriter. Hello, Tremaine. You look like a man who hasn't been in bed in a week.
Oh, hello, Custer. I guess you almost called the turn. I've been up to my ears in work ever since this thing broke. And, brother, it looks like a long, tough pull ahead.
Yeah, no doubt about it. We're in a plenty tight spot. That's what I came to talk to you about.
Okay, pull up a chair. Now then, what's on your mind?
Well, that's simple. There's going to be plenty of action when we start paying off Hirohito for December 7th, and I want to be on hand to see it.
Uh-huh.
In short, I want a chance at an assignment as a war correspondent for United Press.
You're the answer to a prayer, Joe. We've got the biggest staff out here, but we're going to need more men and good ones. I know you well enough to know you can do a real job. You sure you can pitch in at once?
Absolutely.
Okay, then, you're on. And I can put you to work as soon as you can make it, say tomorrow morning?
Sure thing. Thanks, Frank.
Oh, it's my pleasure. See you tomorrow, then.
You can bet your life I kept that appointment. After that came the business of getting myself accredited. Lengthy questionnaires to be filled out for the Navy, birth certificates, pictures, proof of citizenship, character witnesses. Then finally my Navy Department directive for war correspondence arrived. Among other things, I signed an agreement to waive all claims against the United States for losses, damages, or injuries incurred in action. Well, I'd asked for action, and action is what I got. In just a little over 2 months after I had visited Frank Tremaine in the UP offices in Honolulu, I got a chance to go out with a Navy task force. That was a good assignment. I'm sure you'll remember the story. From the sky control of a United States aircraft carrier, I watched American planes drop tons of explosives on Marcus and Wake Islands. It was the first big counterblow our forces struck against the Japs. Yes, sir, that was action, all right. And it seemed like a whale of a story until my next sea assignment came along. Then I learned what all-out war really means. I began to have an inkling of what I was in for after we'd been out several days. The supply officer appeared at my cabin and said,
The clothes in these duffel bags are for you, Mr. Custer.
Yeah? Oh, what are they? Hey, say, these are strange-looking duds to be handing on landlubber.
Yeah? Now, they'll come in handy where we're going.
Yeah, that's a point. Where are we going?
We'll find out soon enough. Don't worry.
Well, sounds like the real thing.
Could be. Now then, first off, this bag contains your flame jacket. Now, it goes on like this. The hood here goes over your head.
I see. What's it intended for?
Well, some of the incendiary bombs that might be used against us throw a flame that'll take your skin off at 50 feet. The jacket and these long-sleeved cotton gloves, these dark shatterproof goggles, and this nose covering, they're all intended to protect you against that.
Happy thought. But why this second bag? It looks like the same sort of outfit to me.
Get a whiff of it with your nose. You'll recognize the difference.
Well, I'll say, chemically treated, aren't they?
Yeah. This outfit is chemically impregnated for protection against gas. Now, here's some trousers, black woolen gloves treated with the same chemical. This, I think you'll recognize as a gas mask. The canister snaps on the jacket like this, the back of your neck. See?
Oh, yes, here.
Yeah, that's right. And here's your tin hat. This last bag is a life jacket.
It looks like an overstuffed vest with a horse collar attached.
Never mind how it looks. It's intended to keep your head afloat in case you're knocked out or faint during action.
All sounds pretty grim.
Oh, don't let that crack about fainting get you. You'll make out all right.
I learned a bit later that we were off Savo Island in the Solomons. Our job was to act as a screen to the transports we were convoying. 36 hours later, in the pitch black of the tropical night, we met the Japs in a blazing inferno, and we were literally in the thick of it. like sitting on a powder keg with the fuse burning shorter every minute. One after the other, in the space of 38 minutes, the Australian Canberra and the USS Quincy and Vincennes went down under the pounding of Japanese warships at point-blank range. I was aboard another U.S. ship, the Astoria. In a little more than 15 minutes of utter hell, she had been hit approximately 200 times. It was afire. Flames amidships and below were eating their way toward her munition stores. In the closing seconds of that night battle, I saw a man spraying water on the gun deck. I kept edging forward unconsciously to see what he was doing. The Jap batteries still were firing. Suddenly...
Here, lean on me. That's it. Put your arm across my shoulder.
I've been hit, sailor.
Take it easy now. Here, you better sit down. There. Is it bad?
I can't see anything. It's my left eye, I guess.
Stay put, buddy. I'll get some water for you. Here. Now let's wipe that blood off your face. Is that better?
Thanks. Yes, it helps. I can see a little now with my right eye. Things seem to be quieting down a bit.
Yeah, the Japs aren't firing anymore. Those explosions, our own ammunition store's going up, I guess. Look, matey, we're in a tight spot. Our ship's in a bad way. Here, slip on this life jacket. I think you'll be all right now. And I'll give you a hand elsewhere. So long.
Good luck. I was pretty weak from loss of blood and from shock. But with my good eye, I saw a great deal of courage and grit. Everyone who could walk and move their arms made certain that everyone else had a life jacket. They carried wounded, fought fires, and went below in search of medical supplies. They may have been scared, for no one knew how long the Astoria'd stay afloat, but not a man lost his head. I heard men calmly discussing the Astoria's prospects. The nearest island was 3 miles away, but they agreed it might prove necessary to swim for it. They were looking for every means of keeping the wounded afloat. That afternoon, a destroyer moved alongside and took off the wounded in the forecastle, about 400 men. The tin can also picked up many survivors of the Quincy and Vincennes. Captain William Greenman had been hit 11 times, but in spite of his wounds, he directed all operations during and after the battle and was among the last to leave the forecastle. He even returned with a salvage cruise.
The Astoria, clinging tenaciously to life, lasted until 12:45 p.m. For long hours, the uninjured members of the crew sought to save her, despite the fact that her power was off and her pumps useless. They drew water from the sea buckets and tin hats and anything else useful. A destroyer tried to take the cruiser in tow, but she was done for. The Astoria suddenly started to list to port, and the 300 men still aboard walked into the water from her slanting decks and swam to the destroyer. Soon after, a roaring underwater explosion administered the coup de grace, and she slid beneath the surface.
I watched with a lump in my throat from the relief ship to which I had been transferred. Rescued sailors also were put aboard the relief ship, but instead of being grateful, they were sore as hell. They wanted to be landed on the beach to fight alongside the Marines in the Solomons.
Joe James Custer wrote his dispatch describing that action en route to a South Pacific base. There he underwent a delicate operation for removal of the shell fragment which had wounded him. Still later, he underwent a second operation at Queen's Hospital in Honolulu in an effort to restore the sight of his left eye. But Joe Custer had neither the time nor the temperament to feel sorry for himself. Almost from the moment he entered Queen's Hospital, he made the lives of doctors and orderlies miserable by insisting on dictating his stories to other members of the UP Bureau in Honolulu. His spirit, his attitude, so typical of the soldiers of the press on every war front, inspired an editorial in the Honolulu Star Bulletin. Under the heading, Heroes Without Heroics, the editor wrote,
"With his eyes bandaged and begoggled, Joe James Custer lies in a bed at Queen's Hospital and wonders what it's going to be like when Dr. F.J. Pinkerton takes off the last wrappings and says, 'Well, Joe, you can go now.' Joe Custer's eyes are bandaged because down in the bloody, roaring Battle of the Solomons, a tiny fragment from a Japanese shell struck him high on the left cheek and slashed its jagged way through skin and muscles and flesh to a point behind the eyeball. Joe Custer got that searing, disabling wound because, as a correspondent of the United Press, he was on an American warship at the attack on the Solomons. Maybe this sounds like a sob story, but it isn't. Joe James Custer isn't wasting any time on sorrow for himself. He's not that kind individually, and he's one of a breed that doesn't indulge in self-pity. A hardy and uncomplaining breed with an enormous and startling fund of knowledge, much of it still secret, with the confidence of admirals and generals and the boys who fly the planes and man the guns. The toll of these correspondents already has been heavy in World War II, but they are neither discouraged nor deterred. Their job is to go where the news is breaking, see it, write it, get it out to the rest of the world. But if you think the average correspondent looks on himself as a hero, you're mistaken. That's what makes him good. He goes about it as a job of work for which he's been trained and to which he's assigned. And he does that job equally without heroics and without flinching.
Yes, that editorial in the Honolulu Star-Bulletin is a fitting tribute to Joe James Custer and his fellow soldiers of the press. His zeal for the truth, his insistence upon seeing for himself the onrushing events that are news, his desire to get the story that lies behind the official communique, these things are typical of United Press correspondents everywhere. We will be back soon with the story of another of these soldiers of the press. Be sure to listen. And in the meantime, remember to listen for United Press news on the air. Look for it in your latest newspaper. It is your guarantee of the world's best coverage of the world's biggest news. Soldiers of the press. Covering today's tremendous news developments is a task that requires resourcefulness, disregard for personal danger, and devotion to duty under the most trying of circumstances. And among the many competent and skillful men representing the United Press in remote scenes of action, none more truly typifies the qualities of a soldier of the press than the man whose story we bring you now, Leo S. Disher, war correspondent.
The story I want to tell you had its beginnings one day several weeks back. I'm not permitted to give you the exact date, in the busy London office of the United Press. I'd come in from an assignment with the U.S. Atlantic Fleet and was giving a hand in London while awaiting the call for my next trip out. I was working on a confidential memorandum for our foreign editor, Joe Alex Morris, when an office boy interrupted me.
Excuse me, Mr. Disher, but Mr. Morris wishes to see you in his office, sir.
Okay. Tell him I'll be along in a few minutes, will you? I want to put the finishing touches on this stuff I'm working on here.
I think he wants to talk to you right away, sir. He said it's important. You're to come right in.
Oh, thanks. Well, under the circumstances, I guess this will have to wait. Oh, Bill!
Yeah?
I'm expecting a phone call. If it comes, I'll be in Morris's office. Hello, Joe. You want to see me?
That's right. Come on in, Disher. Oh, by the way, I think you better close that door behind you.
Oh, sure thing.
That's better. Now then, pull up a chair.
Say, this is beginning to sound interesting. What's up?
I've just come from a conference at Allied Command Headquarters. What I'm about to tell you must be treated with the utmost confidence.
I see.
To get directly to the point, you are one of 5 UP men who've been designated by the Army and Navy commands for what is described as service elsewhere.
Service elsewhere? Any idea what that implies, Joe?
Matter of fact, I've been given no further details, and I've been cautioned against speculation.
I have an idea that this could prove to be a really interesting assignment.
I have an idea you're right. In any event, it seems clear that it's most important. The others who will share your assignment and your secret are Chris Cunningham, Ned Russell, Phil Alt, and Jack Paris. Now remember, not a word about this to anyone else.
Check. I'll pick up a roll of adhesive tape as a precaution against talking in my sleep.
Okay. And now just one more thing. You're to report tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. to Major General John.
That was the start of the greatest adventure of my life. I reported next morning as instructed. The weeks immediately following were miserable. I was given shots for just about every conceivable disease. And worse, I had to try to shrug off my perpetual headaches and lack of appetite with the explanation, hangover. I have an idea several unknowing members of the press corps must have wondered what had come over me. The others in the know fared no better and used the same stock excuse. Still, we managed to guard our secret well. No one caught on. Then, one morning, my doorbell rang at an early hour. I opened the door and was greeted by an Army courier.
Good morning, sir. I'm looking for a Mr. Leo Disher.
I'm Disher.
You're a correspondent for the United Press?
That's right.
I have an important message which I've been instructed to deliver in person. Do you mind if I see your credentials, sir?
Oh, not at all. Just a moment. I'll get them out here. Here you are.
Let's see now. Mm-hmm. This your signature?
Yes.
Very good. Sign this receipt, please, and here you are, sir.
I tore open the envelope he handed me and read its contents hurriedly. I was to report secretly 3 hours later at a designated headquarters fully equipped. The note concluded curtly, destination unspecified. Destination unspecified. That expresses it very well. With a number of officers, I slipped out of London through the blacked-out streets. After a jolting journey, we arrived in due course at our embarkation port. It was clear to everyone by now that this was no mere raid. The harbor was literally teeming with craft. Towering, grim warships, sleek destroyers, massive transports, and a variety of smaller boats reaching almost as far as the eye could see. I stowed my gear aboard a transport to which I was assigned by a young American lieutenant. Later, in the pitch black of a fog-shrouded night, we pushed off. Designation still unspecified. At length, we were called into the wardroom, where the commanding officer of the task force to which I was attached gave us our first definite news of what was up. Everyone listened tensely as his voice came over the public address system.
Gentlemen, we're bound on an offensive mission. Our objective is North Africa. This particular task force has been assigned to take Oran, the great French North African naval base. We've planned an enveloping action. Motorized infantry columns will be landed on the beaches east and west of Oran to converge on the city. A party of 600 American soldiers and British and American sailors will attempt to penetrate Oran harbor to crash the boom so the docks can be seized. This party will be detached at Gibraltar and will be put aboard 2 U.S. Coast Guard cutters which have been designated for this important task.
I learned that one correspondent would be permitted to accompany the small force detailed to try to crash the harbor boom. I applied for that assignment and got it. Before we reached Gibraltar, I had an accident which almost put me out of action. I fractured an ankle in a fall during rough weather. But the ship's physician patched me up with a plaster cast and crutches. And I was hobbling about quite handily by the time we dropped anchor at the big rock fortress guarding the western entrance to the Mediterranean. There I got my first view of the cutter to which I had trusted my fate and met her skipper.
Yes, sir, Mr. Disher. You picked yourself a berth on quite a ship. She never was intended to be a man of war, you know. She rolled so badly that even I get seasick.
I think I'll manage all right, sir, if I can keep these crutches under me. My stomach is more stable than my underpinnings at this point.
Well, you are at a bit of a disadvantage, all right. But you won't be the only lame one aboard. Take the engines, for instance. We brought this cutter across the Atlantic, you know. But her bloomin' engines gave out on us once about halfway over, and then again here at Gibraltar.
So that was my ship, insignificant by comparison with the larger warcraft and transports towering over her. And with her engines a question mark, even in her skipper's mind. But I've never met a finer lot than the men who sailed her. There were American and British naval officers, hard-muscled dynamite-toting commandos, keen, efficient American assault troops. Midnight on the morning of November 8th, we were routed out of bed. I turned out to find the British naval officer who commanded the task force Lieutenant Colonel George Marshall of Jacksonville, Florida, Lieutenant John Cole of Lexington, Kentucky, and other officers already on the bridge. The commander called the chief engineer on his speaking tube and shouted,
"Thousands of lives depend on what you say next. If you say the engines will get us to our destination, we'll stay aboard. But if you say they will and they don't, I'll see that you are court-martialed."
Aye, aye, sir. As chief engineer of this cutter, sir, I'll stake my professional honor that they will get us through.
And so we went. In the murky blackness, I was barely able to see the outlines of the main convoy, which we were leaving behind as we veered off toward Oran. The commander stepped to the PA system and calmly addressed his final remarks to his command.
"Gentlemen, the 0 hour will come for us at 3 a.m. We are on a difficult and dangerous mission. You all know your assigned tasks. Go in and do your jobs like soldiers. And may God bless you."
Slowly, the cliffs of the Algerian coast took form, and I could make out the lights of Oran twinkling to the starboard. I pulled on a life preserver and tied another to the heavy plastic cast on my ankle. We were running without lights, but I could see the outlines of the other cutter and 2 motor launches following us. We passed undetected almost to the harbor mouth. Then suddenly a searchlight blazed out from the shore, groped uncertainly in the dark for a moment, and then picked us up. Shore batteries opened up on us immediately. Suddenly the commander ordered,
"All men below decks, lie flat. We're approaching the boom."
Shells from the shore batteries were crashing all around, and machine gun bullets were spattering on the ship's steel. The cutter shuddered as we crashed the steel cables of the boom and raced inward. The commandos, whose job it was to seize French warships in the harbor, got away safely. We started our run across the harbor under heavy fire. Then French warships started shelling us. The din was deafening. Someone knocked the crutch from my hand. In groping for it, I discovered bodies on the floor. I heard Colonel Marshall's voice above the din.
"Landing parties away!"
We had bumped into a cruiser at the shore end of the harbor. She still was firing at us with her smaller guns. Our turrets blew up, and our depth charges exploded. Steam broke loose on the starboard side. I crawled from the bridge to the deck. Suddenly, I was caught by a blast which sent stabbing red-hot pains through both of my legs. I was hit and bleeding profusely. I pulled myself on my one good leg. Another shell hit us, and again I went down. As I groped over the piles of bodies, I heard a rush for the companionway. For a moment, I thought it was a French boarding party. Then someone grabbed my arm and shouted,
"Help me, partner! Help me!"
I reached for him, but another shell crashed on the bridge, and I went down again, with pain knifing at new wounds. The ship was an inferno. I groped my way down 2 port ladders through the flames. I knocked off my helmet and dropped into the water. My life preserver had been punctured by shrapnel, so I struggled free from it and swam 100 yards to the hawser of a French merchantman. I clung there, attempting to gain strength while bullets splattered all around in the water. I made another try for it and struck off between the ship and the pier. I saw a rope dangling from the pier and summoned enough strength for one final effort. As I caught it, a soldier grabbed me from above, and I rolled out onto the pavement. A shot struck me in the heel of my broken leg. I managed to crawl 75 yards to a wall street, though. It was being raked with gunfire. A spent bullet hit me in the temple. I was unable to go further and just lay there. I learned that a French patrol had found me an hour and a half later. I came to in an underground air raid shelter. Then I was taken by truck to a French hospital. On November 10th, a French nurse came into my room and flung open the window.
Listen, my American friend. You hear? The armistice has been signed. Your American troops are entering Oran. France is raising her head once more.
Accompanying those American troops was Phil Ault, whom I had last seen in the London UP Bureau. American and French officers directed him to me, and I was able to fulfill my assignment to Oran by dictating my story to him.
That story, one of the most dramatic of the war, was carried in newspapers and broadcast by radio stations throughout the free world. 10 days later, Disher was able to hobble on his crutches once more. As fellow war correspondents looked on, Major General Lloyd R. Fredendall pinned the Army Medal of the Purple Heart on Disher's field jacket and presented him with the citation which read,
Leo S. Disher, Jr., while serving with the United States Landing Force in the capacity of war correspondent at Oran Harbor, distinguished himself by extraordinary heroism and meritorious performance of duty against an armed enemy. In the face of withering enemy fire, although several times wounded, Disher remained at his post on the vessel and continued to report for the public press a lucid, accurate, detailed account of the action. After being ordered to abandon ship, Disher swam to shore and, though again wounded 4 times, continued to perform his duty in an exemplary manner with complete disregard for his personal safety.
Leo Disher at Oran, Harold Guard at Singapore, Joe Custer and Robert C. Miller on Guadalcanal, Henry Gurrell and Richard McMillan in the Libyan desert. These are but a few of the long list of United Press correspondents who have faced enemy gunfire, endured privation, braved pestilence and capture to obtain at first hand the stories behind the official communiques. We will return soon with another of these dramatic personal stories of the soldiers of the press. Be sure to listen. And meanwhile, listen for United Press News on the air. Look for it in your favorite newspaper. It is your guarantee of the world's best coverage of the world's biggest news.
Soldiers of the Press.
Today's war correspondents perform their tasks under battle conditions. Many of them have suffered searing, disabling wounds in performance of their duty. Among the many soldiers of the press who comprise the staff of the United Press, there are others who have been called upon for yet another kind of bravery, to remain at their posts in hostile and war-threatened capitals at the risk and frequently at the sacrifice of their freedom. Such a man is the correspondent whose story we bring you now, Robert T. Belair, manager of the former United Press Bureau in Tokyo.
The story I have to tell is not pretty. It's a story of inhumanity, of brutality. A story of what happened to those Americans who fell into Japanese hands when Premier Tojo and the Japanese military clique plunged their country into war with the United States. I know the facts all too well, because I was one of that American group in Tokyo. After nearly 6 years on a variety of assignments in the Far East, the United Press had sent me to Japan early in 1941 as manager of its Tokyo bureau. It was an uneasy and unpleasant assignment from the first. Police paid frequent visits to the United Press Bureau. Censorship became progressively more strict and hampering. One day in early November, a Japanese plainclothesman spent the entire day reading every item I had written. As he shuffled through my papers, he would turn to me at intervals and say,
"I very sorry for you. I very sorry for you."
The next indication I had that I was in for serious trouble of some sort came several weeks later. A knock at the door of my apartment aroused me from a sound sleep. I snapped on a light and slipped into my robe, glanced at my watch. It was nearly midnight. I shuffled to the door in my slippers and released the latch. It was pitch black outside and a cold wind was blowing. A woman's figure suddenly emerged from the shadows. I recognized her as one of my Japanese neighbors.
May I please come in?
Well, certainly do come in. You surprised me. I'd been asleep.
Yes, but I have important word for you. You American have been my friend. Now you in danger. For safety, you must burn all papers you do not want to fall into hands of police.
Well, why? I don't understand. Well, what's the matter? What's going on? Do you think the war is about to start?
So sorry. I can only warn you. You soon to be arrested. Please burn papers, as I say. It save you much trouble later.
Well, I will by all means. And I'm deeply grateful to you for your warning. But look, you shouldn't have done it. You risked imprisonment by coming here like this, didn't you?
Is so. And for that reason, I must go quickly home without being seen. But I am honored to do you small service. Recently, you did me great kindness. Goodbye and best luck. Sayonara.
Damarigato. Sayonara. I stood there for a moment, trying to remember what great kindness she had meant. Then it came back to me suddenly. 2 weeks earlier, I had given her, the wife of a former Japanese cabinet officer, a bit of cloth, a package of needles, and 2 papers of pins. In gratitude for those small gifts, she had risked imprisonment or worse to bring me her warning. Small items loom large in a country that has been at war for 6 years. Well, I took her warning and sorted my papers carefully, both at home and at the office. And it's impossible to say how much future grief and abuse that saved me. And I was not long learning the grave implications of what I'd been told. You remember the circumstances. A Japanese peace mission was in Washington discussing possible terms of settlement of differences between Japan and the United States. The American colony in Tokyo was extremely apprehensive. We knew that the situation was critical. I'd worked late the night of December 7th. At about 5:15 a.m., my house phone rang. Hello? Who? Oh, Dome. Yes, this is Bel Air of United Press. What? No. Yeah, I have it all. Japanese planes have attacked Pearl Harbor. War is to be declared at 11 a.m. Yeah, I'm sorry to hear it, too. And thanks. Thanks for calling. There was nothing I could do except get ready for the inevitable police. They came at 6 a.m. I was carted off to a concentration camp near Tokyo in which I was to spend 6 of the most miserable months of my life. The camp was a former girls' school between Tokyo and Yokohama. For 2 months, we were held incommunicado, permitted to see or talk to no one from the outside. 13 of us were packed into one small, dismal room. We complained that disease was spreading because of the unsanitary and overcrowded conditions. And once, one of the correspondents told the Stanford University-educated doctor that there were too many men in the room. To this, he replied,
Well, why don't you then put skirts on some of them?
Once a week, we were offered a bath, all 13 of us, in the same water previously used by 30 police and several greasy cooks. We had no medical attention, no heat, during Tokyo's freezing winter. And food? Let me tell you about the food we received in that Japanese prison camp. Our lunch was typical. We were given greenish whale meat or rotted fish heads boiled with alfalfa. Our Japanese keepers in that internment camp employed all manner of mental torment in an attempt to break our morale. Once I was called into the main office.
Your name, please.
I'm Robert Belair. You asked to have me brought here?
Yes, you write for United Press?
Yes.
As you see this letter from your wife.
Oh, swell.
And these pictures, your children?
Oh, well, I'm very glad.
You cannot have them. See, I tear them up.
Oh, please. Please, let me have the pieces. Let me put them back together,
Keep
please.
away. You get nothing. Go. Out.
That will give you some idea of the treatment American internees receive from the Japanese, while Japanese internees in the United States were living in luxury in White Sulphur Springs. But many fared much worse than I. There was the water treatment for those our captors tried to make confess to spying. Do you ever hear how the water treatment works? I'll tell you. First, your arms and legs are bound together, with your knees under your chin. Then you're suspended by a rope, head down. Then your jailers begin pouring buckets of water over your head. It strangles you. It pours up your nose. You can't breathe. Eventually, you lose consciousness. And that's just the beginning. Next, you're slapped back to consciousness or possibly beaten back to your senses with a rubber hose. And then you're given an opportunity to confess things of which you're not guilty. If you refuse, the treatment begins all over again. Some of our group were forced to kneel Japanese fashion on iron bars for hour after hour until muscles ached beyond endurance and the flesh on their legs broke open. These things happened to people like J.B. Powell of the China Weekly Review, and Otto Delicious of the New York Times, and others. At least one newspaper correspondent interned by the Japanese never will walk again as a result of such treatment, and several will limp for the rest of their lives. All of us were frequently threatened with execution by firing squads. The only bright moment of our internment came April 18th, when Jimmy Doolittle and his fellow flyers skimmed over Tokyo's rooftops and dropped the first bombs, but certainly not the last ever to fall on Japanese soil. We heard the explosions and from our barred windows could see the planes and the smoke of burning buildings rising in their wake. That day, all of us took new hope. At long last, on May 30th, We learned that arrangements had been completed for our return home in exchange for Japanese internees held in America. We were called before Inspector Kikuchi of the Metropolitan Police. He greeted us with the first smile any of us had seen on his face during our 6 months in jail.
I have just learned from Japanese Home Office that in spite of war, Japanese newspaper correspondents in United States are being well treated. The Home Office now is trying to think of some way to be nice to you. Please wait.
We waited 2 days. Then we were invited to what was probably one of the strangest parties ever given any group of newspapermen. We were escorted to the famous Sano Hotel. We were greeted by 10 young Japanese who spoke excellent English. They informed us that they represented the Pacific War Relief Council. For 30 minutes, we were shown newsreels of Japanese war successes, while Japanese seated beside us interpreted the insulting titles on the screen. Next, we were given the best meal any of us had seen since long before the war began. And midway through the luncheon, one of the young Japanese arose to speak.
You are extremely fortunate in being permitted to leave for home within a fortnight. Others must stay behind. If each of you write an article on Japan and the kind treatment you have received, we can raise 4,000 yen from the English language newspapers in Japanese-occupied areas. We will use these funds to aid your fellow countrymen.
Japan's kind treatment of us. I arose and thanked the chairman on behalf of the Americans present for the opportunity of aiding our fellow countrymen. I said that after our own experiences, we were eager to do everything possible to improve the lot of others in our position. But I explained that none of us could write for anyone except our respective employers, and added that I was sure that all would be willing to contribute to raise the fund of 4,000 yen. At that, we were all told to go up to private rooms. Smilingly, our Japanese host said we were to have an opportunity to take hot private baths. Suspecting what was coming, we declined. Then we were ordered to take those baths. The chairman and another member of the Japanese committee accompanied to my door. They opened the door, and I could see that my work was cut out for me. A typewriter was in the center of the room.
Here are a typewriter and paper. You write the story for us now?
This is for your own good. Some Japanese officials do not favor repatriation of you American newspapermen. They are afraid you will write anti-Japanese propaganda when you get home.
Well, what do you want me to write about?
I have it here, this slip of paper. The Home Office wants you to write on the topic, China should cooperate with Japan.
But I refuse.
Then you will never leave Japan. You will never leave this room. I choke you until you do write for me. You will write now? You will write now?
When I regained consciousness, I tapped out a few lines, making them sound as much like Japanese propaganda as possible. Japanese cliches no American would think of using. The august virtue of his imperial majesty, co-prosperity sphere. When the chairman returned, he beamed. The short article must have sounded to him exactly like one of Tojo's speeches, and that's what I wanted. I knew no one would ever mistake that tripe for the sentiments or willing expression of any American. 2 weeks later, we were permitted to sail for home, a long, tortuous journey by way of Lourenço Marques and the Rio de Janeiro. Finally, on the morning of August 26th, we sighted the skyline of New York, dimly visible through the mists of the harbor. A group of Maryknoll priests and nuns aboard had formed a choir. As we moved slowly toward our pier, they sang America. And suddenly, the Statue of Liberty loomed up through the fog. A lump tightened in my throat. Tears welled up in my eyes. I was home. Home from my United Press assignment to Tokyo.
Robert Belair is but one of many correspondents of the United Press who have faced hardship and danger to cover their assignments, to gather and write the facts, the truth which every American expects in his news. On every news front, in every news center, such men are on the job, reporting the news accurately, completely, and speedily. We will return soon with another of these programs, dramatizing the experiences of these soldiers of the press. Be sure to listen. And meanwhile, look for United Press News in your favorite newspaper. Listen for it on the radio. It is your guarantee of the world's best coverage of the world's biggest news.
Soldiers of the Press.
In and out of Hawaii move the ships, the planes, and the men who are carrying the fight to the Japanese in the scattered islands and on the broad sea lanes of the Pacific. And with them go the correspondents of the United Press, recording epic events at such remote points as New Guinea, Midway, the Solomons. For Honolulu is as much an operations base for war correspondents as for the fleet. We bring you now the story of a man who has seen as much or more of action in the Pacific than any other of the Corps of Correspondents whose home base is Honolulu. United Press correspondent William Tyree.
I've been covering the war on the Pacific since the day it began. In fact, in terms of the newspaper men passing through Honolulu since Pearl Harbor, I'm looked upon as something of a veteran war correspondent. You see, I was transferred to Honolulu as night manager of the United Press Bureau more than a year before the Japs staged their sneak raid on Hawaii. Like every other American who watched the smoke billowing up from burning ships and aircraft on December 7th, I was hopping mad. My first impulse was to join one of the armed forces in order to get a direct crack at the nips. So I dropped in on my boss, Frank Tremaine, late one afternoon a few days later to talk it over.
Hello, Bill. Come on in.
Thanks, Frank. If you've got a few minutes, I'd like to talk over a personal problem with you.
Certainly. What's on your mind?
Well, Frank, I'm still sore at the way the Japanese dragged us into this war, and I've been considering enlistment. I'm husky, hale and hardy, have no flat feet, and possess the prescribed number of teeth.
I see.
I don't know just where I'd fit in, but I think I'd make a passable buck private.
I see, Bill. And I can sympathize with your sentiments. In fact, I've even turned the same ideas over in my own mind.
Yeah?
I think all of us out here who saw what happened in the harbor and at Hickam Field feel pretty much the same. But here's a point I'd like you to consider. As you said, you don't know where you'd fit in the Army.
A buck private, remember?
Okay, buck private. But look, Bill, you're a trained man working on a job that's vitally important to the war effort. Gathering the news, getting it right and getting it out. It's taken 6 years to make a foreign correspondent of you, and, well, you're a good one.
Thanks.
The point is, I'm not so sure the Army could make a good buck private of you. You like to sleep late of mornings too darn well.
No cracks. Remember, I work nights. But look, I want to see the show when we start handing it back to the Japs. I want to be in on that.
Well, Bill, you will. You're going to be accredited as UP correspondent with the Pacific Fleet. That's strictly between us for the present. But it's going through, and you'll be seeing plenty of action.
Swell. Pacific Fleet assignment. That sounds more like it.
Well, Bill, as I look at it, you'll be doing an important job which you can do well if you stick. How about it?
Good point. And if it means a chance to really get into some action, I'm still your man. Well, I stuck. And as for action, I've had a year jam-packed with it. Small operations with task forces at first. Then I really got into the thick of it in the Coral Sea. I had a ringside seat for that one aboard a U.S. cruiser. I got my initiation of bombing and learned to duck when Jap planes came close enough to rake our decks with machine gun fire. I saw the 33,000-ton Lexington ripped by torpedoes and bombs. Saw her heel over and go down. And I wiped tears from my eyes as her rescued crew members watched her disappear. But during that 4-day engagement, I also saw the beginnings of America's repayment of Japan's treachery at Pearl Harbor 5 months earlier. I talked with an American pilot who had dropped a 1,000-pound bomb squarely on the flight deck of a Jap aircraft carrier. He told me,
Boy, when that bomb hit, it was terrific. That Jap carrier opened up like a volcano.
And next day, I cheered with the crew when the skipper announced the score over the ship's public address system.
The enemy has been definitely halted for the moment. Our
best estimates are that he has paid for the destruction of the Lexington with a loss of 23 and possibly 24 Japanese warships. Our observers report that the enemy has withdrawn and that contact has been lost. So, for the time being, this cruiser will not get a whack at his ships. But this will be a long war. We will catch him again. Every time he steps out, we'll snip off his ships. Then, when his naval power is exhausted, we can roll right up to Tokyo.
We will catch him again. The skipper had promised it, and that's what we did. For weeks, we were constantly on the alert. Everyone was convinced that the Japanese fleet was reforming to strike another blow. And it came on the 4th of June. Our ship's radio crackled with the electrifying news.
Strong force of enemy ships sighted by Navy patrol planes 700 miles off Midway.
The ship's bugles sound general quarters, and I make a dash for the bridge, where I'll have access to the ship's fighter circuit radio.
Hello, Tyree. You're always yelling for action, so get set. This looks like the blow-off.
Big pack of nips out front, huh?
Right. Observers say the enemy has 80 or more warcraft headed this way. Hey, wait a minute, listen. Our carrier is sending up her planes.
Boy, look at them. A comforting sight.
Here, let's cut in the fighter circuit.
Spotted them. Prepare to repel attack. Jap fighter and torpedo planes. 12 miles. Step on it.
I can't see anything.
Don't be impatient. Even at 300 miles an hour, 12 miles is a bit of a hop, you know. Use your glasses. Yep, here they come.
Check. Now I can make them out. Just above the waves. Man, look at them. Come.
Torpedo planes. They're the bad ones.
Men's firing.
Sit tight. This is it.
Ten of them. Good Lord, did you see that one explode?
4 of them can't take our fire. They're pulling up to get out.
Hey, look. One of our own fighters. He's coming straight into our fire to get that Jap. Oh, wow, the Jap's down and he's zoomed up out of it. Man, what a guy.
There come the torpedoes. See the wake?
Yeah. Hey, one's going to be close.
Yes, it's going to... No, it's wide. 500 yards off our bow. Hey, there comes one plane straight for us.
My God, I believe he's going to try to crash us. He's just about. We got him. Boy, oh, boy, that was too close for comfort. The attack had been beaten off, and I suddenly became aware that our public address system was cut in on a report from Midway.
Enemy ships, including battleships, carriers, cruisers, and transports, have been hit many times by our bombers. We hear there are 3 enemy ships burning satisfactorily 170 miles off Midway. News comes that we have destroyed 2 enemy carriers and have badly damaged 2 others.
You remember the final score of that battle? 10 Japanese warships, including 4 aircraft carriers, sunk. At least 8 other warships damaged. The Japs driven back from Midway. By the time we put back in at Pearl Harbor, I'd made up my mind on another assignment I wanted. The performance of American aircraft in the Coral Sea and at Midway had given me a yen to have a closer look at air war from the belly of a bomber bent on business. I asked for and got an assignment with the U.S. Air Force in the South Pacific. I had the pleasure of craning my neck over the open door of the Bombay of a flying fortress. I've watched her bombs fall away to dissolve in blasts of flame and smoke from Japanese installations on Buka Airfield in the northern Solomons. I'd come to think of myself as something of a case-hardened war correspondent until one day not long ago when our big B-17 sat down on Henderson Field on Guadalcanal. I dropped to the runway and spotted a Marine sergeant who looked like he could supply the information I wanted. Hey, Sergeant.
Yeah?
Got a minute?
Sure, buddy. What do you want?
I just came in on that B-17. I'm a newspaperman, William Tyree of United Press.
Glad to know you.
Hiya. We're supposed to have a guy down here named Francis McCarthy. You know where I can locate him?
Sure thing. He'd be with the rest of them correspondents at Press Tent. Now, come on, it's not far. I'll show you.
Thanks. Say, by the way, how are McCarthy and the rest of your newshawks making out?
They're doing all right. They're plenty tough. If you ask me, you newspaper guys ain't bright. A Marine, me, for instance. If I'm gonna get it, I'm gonna get it. But, brother, I'm not asking to get myself bumped off standing on top of a hill like you dumb newspaper men with your cameras and portable typewriters.
I located the Guadalcanal press tent, and I learned what the sergeant had meant. McCarthy had been on Guadalcanal for 30 days. He'd gone through 2 attacks of dysentery, half a dozen assorted tropical complaints, and had suffered a broken rib and a fall from a cliff while on patrol with the Marines. Sherman Montrose, a photographer for Acme News Pictures, had the same experiences to report, except for the broken rib. Bombing and shelling attacks were a daily routine, and life was rugged, to put it mildly. My first morning there will give you an idea.
Hey, Tyree, come out of it. It's dawn. You'll miss the regular morning shelling if you don't hurry.
Oh, for the love of Mike, McCarthy doesn't even light yet.
Yeah, well, look, chum, we got to get out and get some breakfast and pronto.
Go away.
Hey, you hear that? Our Japanese neighbors are up and about. They're starting the shelling already. Oh, hello, Monty.
Oh, hello, Mac.
I can't seem to impress our friend here with the fact that breakfast is catch as catch can and now or never on Guadalcanal.
Hello, Tyree. Now, look, Mac's right. You'll love it. Breakfast will be, and not for a change, pancakes without butter. They serve a concoction with them that's 1 part sugar and 9 parts what I suspect is drainage from the crankcase of a Jeep. Oh, yeah. You'll get to wash it down with chlorinated coffee. Then you'll be set to start the day.
Sounds swell.
Well, I'll admit I can't resist that. So you 6 guys in this pup tent make room for a man to stretch.
Hey, that one was close.
Think nothing of it, Bill. Wait till you meet our Japanese snipers. The woods are full of them. They're good, too.
Yes, sir. They can knock the ashes off your cigarette at 200 yards.
You can't see them either, you know. They perch in the trees all dressed in camouflaged green outfits and wham away at you.
Sounds just lovely.
Well, we're glad you like the idea. You see, that's our usual initiation for newcomers to the Guadalcanal press tent.
Yeah. Come on, fellas. We got to get a move on. Let's take Tyree out and get him shot at.
No, sorry, not me. I'm just passing through these parts. I'm going to climb back aboard my B-17 and go out on a nice, peaceful bombing raid. Actually, I stayed 3 days, and a good half of that time was spent in foxholes, dodging bombs and shells. I got that initiation by Jap snipers, too. I left just a short time before the Japanese made one of their biggest bids to recapture the strategic island. For 3 days of what McCarthy described as unmitigated hell, the Japanese hammered at American positions with continuous land, air, and sea attacks. Well, I'm convinced that the Guadalcanal Press Corps has seen as much action as anyone could want. And I know I've had plenty of opportunity for close contact with the enemy. Before this show is over, I hope to have plenty more. Possibly even that ride to Tokyo, which every sailor, soldier, and flyer in our armed forces is aiming for.
Yes, Tyree and McCarthy and scores of others on the worldwide staff of the United Press are seeing the great developments of this war at first hand, or reporting them direct from the scenes of action. They are living the adventures we bring to you in this series of programs. Be sure to hear the next edition of Soldiers of the Press. And meanwhile, listen for United Press News on the air. Look for it in your favorite newspaper. It is your guarantee of the world's best coverage of the world's biggest news.
Soldiers of the Press. It is a tale that should be put in scrapbooks and read in schoolrooms. A tale that should shame every civilian who has groused about the war and its sacrifices and hardships. It is a story of average men facing death or capture with all the odds against them.
That editorial comment in the Cincinnati Post was inspired by Frank Hewlett's dramatic eyewitness account of the fall of Bataan. Frank Hewlett of United Press was the only regular correspondent who remained on the bomb-blasted Bullet Rake Peninsula until the very end of Bataan's grim, dogged resistance. Here, then, is the personal story of Frank Hewlett, soldier of the press.
They say that kids from Idaho are born with roving feet. I know I was. Pocatello is my hometown, and I got my first newspaper job on the Idaho State Journal. But even then, I had the Orient in mind. And as fast as my roving feet and newspaper jobs could carry me, I got there. For 5 years, I roamed the Pacific, looking for headline material and adventure. Then, in a few short weeks, I found more headline stories, more adventure, and more experience than a newspaper man ordinarily can hope for in a lifetime. It all began on a well-remembered Sunday, December 7th, 1941. I was in Manila, a member of the staff of the United Press Bureau there. Richard Wilson, our bureau manager, was away on a trip. Word had just reached us of the bombing of Pearl Harbor.
I got your message at home, Frank, and came right down. How bad is it?
Doesn't look too good. Japs apparently have handed Pearl Harbor an awful pasting. Details aren't quite clear yet.
Any news from Wilson yet?
I had a cable from him earlier, scheduled to fly in from Hong Kong. Been trying to reach Hong Kong, but no luck. I have a phone call in now for Pan American to see what they know. Oh, this may be it now.
You, Hewlett?
Thanks. Hello? Yes, speaking. Oh, I see. They didn't get away? Oh, too bad. Well, do you think there's a chance that... I see. Yeah. Yes, thanks.
Well, what's the word?
Well, the Clipper didn't get away. They're not sure just what did happen, but they say there's not much hope that anyone at Hong Kong will get away from there now.
Well, brother, it looks like you inherited quite an assignment.
It does that. And I'll need the cooperation of all of you.
You bet, Chief. Count on us, Frank.
There's a big job ahead, and war's not exactly my dish, you know. I never happened to run into a war before. Well, overnight, I blossomed into a war correspondent. We had a good staff, and everyone pitched in to cover the biggest story any of us ever had encountered. To begin with, I had a lucky break. The United Press had a venerable old wireless transmitter in Manila. Not much to look at. Its power was low, and its antenna was strung on bamboo poles. But by one of the strange quirks of radio, its signal could be heard clearly by the UP listening post at Santiago, Chile. We kept it going for the first 3 weeks of the war, supplying news to New York headquarters frequently hours before the same news could be moved over regular communication channels.
Hewlett's wife, Virginia Hewlett, played a major part in scoring one such beat. She had volunteered to help the overworked staff in High Commissioner Sayers' office. But Mrs. Hewlett shared her husband's instinct and enthusiasm for a big story. Manila, by December 27th, had been declared an open city in an effort to spare it further bombings. When swarms of Japanese bombers roared over the city, Mrs. Hewlett rushed to the UP Bureau to lend a hand. Hewlett had gone to the port area where the attack was heaviest.
Yes, Frank? Sounds kind of lively out there.
It is. They just got a church. Ready?
Fire away.
A 16th century church and school have just been smashed. I walked on ruined school books, torn tablets from children's desks, and examination papers which had been bomb blasted from the elementary school. As I passed, 3 aged nuns were being escorted into the streets. The church is in flames. Lifeless bodies are being removed, and others, I believe, buried in the debris. A score of persons were killed at prayer. That's all for now.
Oh, Frank, you've got a tremendous story here.
We've got a tremendous story, honey.
Take care of yourself. Be seeing you.
Be seeing you.
A few weeks later, the Japanese army closed in on Manila. Virginia Hewlett, still at her post in Commissioner Sayers' office, was in Manila proper. Hewlett was at the front with American and Filipino troops.
We learned on New Year's Eve that the Japs had Manila, and that MacArthur was withdrawing his forces to Bataan Peninsula. There was no time for anybody to lose. We knew bridges to the peninsula had been mined and were to be blown up as soon as the troops got across. My car and Tony, my native chauffeur, were waiting to get going.
Ready now, please, boss? Plenty hurry.
I know, Tony, but I've been trying to reach Mrs. Hewlett to make sure she got out of the city all right.
Hey, Hewlett, hold on. Message for you.
Here, this just came by courier. Oh, fine, thanks. Oh, hold everything, Tony. This is probably for Mrs. Hewlett.
Missy Hewlett, okay?
Regret to inform you, Mrs. Hewlett failed to escape from Manila before the Japanese arrived.
She be seeing us like she always say?
Huh? Oh, yes, that's right, Tony. She'll be seeing us.
Hey, for God's sake, step on it, Hewlett. Don't you know the bridges to Bataan are mined? They'll blow her at midnight.
All right, Tony. Let's go.
Hey, plenty hurry, huh, boss?
Yeah, right you are, Tony. Well, just got across in time.
Yeah, look at watch. After midnight. Happy New Year, boss.
Yes. Happy New Year, Tony.
Hewlett's was the last car to reach Bataan. There he established contact with his headquarters office in New York by means of Navy radio and covered the 98-day siege of the peninsula from beginning to end.
Bataan wasn't so bad the first 2 months. The men began the fight as seasoned, strong, carefree soldiers, talking about how they'd pay off the Japs when reinforcements arrived, for they believed that reinforcements would arrive. That was the beginning of the siege. At the end, every man had lost weight and was dragging himself by willpower alone into actions. They'd eaten every water buffalo on the peninsula. They'd eaten all the horses of the 26th Cavalry and most of the pack mules. They'd eaten stewed monkey, and still there wasn't enough food. Rations had been cut in half, and then cut again. Tea, coffee, sugar, and flour had disappeared. There were 2 slender meals a day. Plain rice for one meal, and rice with canned milk for the other. I've seen a soldier pay 5 pesos, the equivalent of $2.50 for one cigarette. I've seen a group of them line up, and each man take a drag on a single cigarette. Some tried to smoke dried bark and leaves. Then the quinine began to give out. On April 9th, the Army radio, the voice of freedom, made the grim announcement.
The voice of freedom speaking. Bataan has fallen. The Filipino and American troops on this war-ravaged, blood-stained peninsula have laid down their arms with their heads bloody but unbowed.
Frank Hewlett was the only regular American press correspondent who remained on Bataan until the very end of resistance. He then withdrew with the defenders to Corregidor.
It was a strange procession, that brave strafing by Japanese planes to stream across the treacherous 5 miles of water between Bataan and Corregidor. A ragtag fleet of every available boat. One bright spot in the tragic day was that the nurses were evacuated safely. One of them, Erlene Allen of Jacksonville, Illinois, I had known in Manila. She and her doctor fiancé, Captain Garnett Francis of Alexandria, Virginia, have been friends of my wife's and mine.
Frank Hewlett.
Oh.
Gosh, it's so good to see you.
Well, it's good to see you, too, Arlene. Oh, now, take it easy now. Everything's okay.
Of course, I'm sorry to be such a baby. It's just seeing you standing there.
I know. What about Gary?
Well, Gary and I were married, Frank, on Bataan 2 months ago.
Good.
We had to keep it a secret because I would have had to resign, and we wanted to stay together as long as possible. Said goodbye last night at the field hospital.
Oh, poor kid. It's tough.
Gary's staying there, of course, with the other doctors to look after the patients. If only they'd let me stay, too.
I know how you feel.
Tell me, how about Virginia? Is she all right?
Well, I'm not sure. You see, she couldn't get out of Manila before the Japs took over.
Oh.
She's still there.
Virginia? In an internment camp?
That's it. And what a story she'll bring out with her. A tremendous story.
I can hear her saying it. Tremendous. Oh, Frank. Well, you've got a tremendous story to handle right here and now yourself.
A tale that should shame every civilian who has groused about this war and its sacrifices and hardships. That's what a newspaper editorial writer said of the dispatch Frank Hewlett sent back that night. Listen to it in Hewlett's own words.
At the end, the Bataan army crumbled like the one-horse shay. And I know why.
Yes, I know why. Because Americans and Filipinos had fought 15 days and 15 nights without pause, with dive bombers shrieking down on them in droves and heavy bombers pulverizing their rear.
I know why. Because the Japs brought in long-range artillery that laid down terrific barrages.
And because tanks were used unmercifully to dislodge our dug-in forces from their foxholes. Because the Japs brought in fresh, well-fed shock troops, the pick of the Mikado's armies. And our men were hungry, and tired, and sick.
I know why. In the last desperate showdown, the Battle of Bataan ended because the quinine pills ran out.
There was ammunition aplenty. There was courage aplenty, too. But there was no quinine to fight that deadliest of our enemies, malaria. All the men fought well. Not even now is all the story known of the heroism and endurance of the Filipinos and Americans who fought so stoutly in jungle fastnesses and along the rugged coast. They had faith that was unconquerable. They were fighting for their people and their country, and for freedom and dignity and pride. Bataan has fallen, but its spirit stands, a beacon to liberty-loving peoples of the world.
Yes, that was a tremendous story. A story that won for Frank Hewlett the award of the National Headliners Club for Outstanding Individual Enterprise. When General Royce staged his daring bombing raids on Japanese positions in the Philippines during the siege of Corregidor, Hewlett returned with him to Australia to continue his assignment as war correspondent for the United Press. Today, his dispatches are datelined with Allied forces somewhere in New Guinea. Your local announcer will tell you when you may hear the story of another of the soldiers of the press who, like Frank Hewlett, are witnessing and reporting frontline action. Be sure to listen. And meanwhile, look for United Press News in your favorite newspaper. Listen for United Press News on the air. It is your guarantee of the world's best coverage of the world's biggest news. Soldiers of the Press. Whenever new battlefronts are opened, you'll find the shock troops of news, the war reporters, moving up with our armed forces. For theirs is the difficult and dangerous task of keeping the home front informed of developments on the far-flung fighting lines. When American and British forces swarmed ashore in North Africa, 7 United Press correspondents rode with the Rangers and commandos in the landing barges or watched the action from the bridges and gun decks of warships screening the landings. This is the story of one of those men, Ned Russell of United Press.
You've never heard of Stuka Acres, I'm sure. And I know for a certainty you won't find it on any map. Yet in more than 3 years covering war, the events of 72 hours at Stuka Acres have left a deeper and more lasting impression on my mind than any other experience of my life. Stuka Acres is, or I should say was, a small Tunisian farm near the equally insignificant village of Tuburba. The name was given it by those of us who went through 3 days of incessant bombing and strafing by German dive bombers at that Allied advance post. But perhaps I'd better begin by telling you how I came to go to Tuburba in the first place. Well, I was one of a group of United Press correspondents sent out from London to cover what turned out to be the opening of a second front. I first set foot on North African soil in the half-light of a chilly dawn, with a small party of American Rangers who'd been detailed to take a strategic airfield at Blida, 30 miles southwest of Algiers. As we splashed ashore, a British lieutenant colonel with our task force commanded sharply.
Deploy and take cover in the dunes, men. Be alert for a signal. Henderson. Yes, sir. Smith. Yes, sir. Laughlin. Yes, sir. Hart, you'll move forward with me.
May I accompany you, sir?
Can't make you out in the dark. Who is it?
Russell. Ned Russell.
Oh, of course, Russell. Yes, come along. But keep down, all of you. Now then, forward.
Okay. Oh. Hey, you behind. Watch out for that hole in the beach.
Hey, flatten out.
What was that?
It may be our signal. Listen.
That was V. Yeah, V for victory.
All right. Who goes there?
Friend of the American and British comrades.
Advance, friend. Give the password.
Cousin, 10, 2, 7.
Cousin, 7, 2, 10.
At last you've come. It has been a long night in the dunes and a cold one. But everything is in readiness for you. All French commanders have been instructed to facilitate the debarkation and establishment ashore of your American troops. Permit me to introduce myself. I am Captain Pierre Maron.
The landing was as simple as that. Within 20 minutes after we waded ashore, dripping wet from the surf, the fort at Sidi Farouk had capitulated. Half an hour later, the Blida airport fell into our hands without a shot being fired. 2 hours later, the bugler at Fort L'Empereur, at the western gateway of Algiers, sounded the ceasefire call, ending resistance there. So we pushed eastward. There was some fighting, of course, spotted but fierce at times. Still, the overall effect was somehow reminiscent of a comic opera. LBR, one of the suburbs of Algiers, will illustrate what I mean. We encountered limited French resistance there. Snipers who withdrew through the town firing from houses. They went. Our troops moved in, dodging from tree to lamppost in approved cops and robbers fashion, and whamming away at the enemy with their garons. The natives were delighted. They watched from their doorways, and at every lull, someone would poke his head through the door of the local cafe and invite us to have a glass of wine. Results were being achieved, and rapidly. Make no mistake about that. Lieutenant General Clark and his corps of advance agents had done a thorough and effective job of laying the groundwork for the arrival of the Allied forces. But war with intermissions for Vin Rouge was hardly what I'd been counting on. 2 other American press representatives who had landed with our troops at Algiers were equally restless. A few days later, the 3 of us were having a drink in a small cafe in eastern Algeria. We were grousing about the lack of action when a mechanized force rolled through the streets.
Hey, look! The Yanks are coming.
Yeah, Bill. They say the Germans are getting set to make a stand at the Tunisian border.
Well, what do you say, fellas? Let's see if we can't thumb our way up front with this outfit. I'd like to think I'd filed one good story this week.
Wait a minute. Wait. Opportunity knocks.
Uh-huh.
One of the command cars has stopped. An officer is coming in.
Oh, hello, Captain. Won't you join us?
Oh, hello. The press, eh?
That's right.
What are you fellas doing here? Don't you know there's a war on?
No. There's an ugly rumor to that.
Well, that's what we'd like to talk to you about. Won't you sit down? Oh, waiter. Vin Rouge pour le capitaine.
Oh, thanks. One gets pretty dry herding a flock of tanks and half-tracks through this dust.
Yeah, I bet.
Well, here's health.
Right. USA.
And now, what's on your mind?
You're headed toward the Tunisian border, aren't you?
Yes, that's right.
What are the chances of getting to see some action up that way?
From what I hear, they're good. That's why we're going up. Reinforcements. The Germans are said to have a sizable force somewhere east of the village of Tabourba.
Well, how about hitching a ride with your outfit? If there's going to be a show, we'd like to be in on it.
Yeah, how about it?
Can you manage it?
Let's see now. Well, if you don't mind a bit of crowding and don't insist upon air conditioning, I think I can pack you into the rear of our command car.
Oh,
Okay,
great.
that suits me.
Well, let's be going.
Sure thing. Oh, by the way, I think we'd better introduce ourselves. I'm Ned Russell of the United Press.
Glad to know you, Russell.
How do you do, sir? This is William Stoneman of the Chicago News.
Hello, Stoneman.
And this is...
I'm Captain T.R.
That's how 3 members of the American Press Corps happened to wind up at Stuka Acres, where we almost ended our journalistic careers.
Russell and his companions moved on up to a small farm which served as battalion headquarters. They set up shop in a mud hut that formerly belonged to an Arab farmhand. Before the first night fell, the Germans made 3 bombing attacks on American and British positions less than a mile away. The following day, the Germans increased their pressure. German mortars moved into position to shell the valley in front of the farm. Waves of bombers came over endlessly. In 1 2-hour period, they counted 5 separate aerial attacks. Stukas, Junker 88s, and Messerschmitts, which zoomed down to strafe-allied positions from a height of only a few feet. The very earth heaved from nearby bomb hits until Stuka Acres became a roaring, rocking hell. British and American guns from the ridges close by added to the din.
Our second night at Stuka Acres, I tried to transcribe my notes on my portable typewriter. But I found that I was half deaf from the concussion of the bombs. My teeth ached from shock. My nerves were jumpy. So I gave up and crawled into a corner to try to catch a few winks of sleep. Just before dawn, I was awakened by the sound of bombs and artillery, which were churning up a plowed field a few hundred yards to the south. I made a dash for headquarters.
Oh, hello, Ned.
Hello, Bill.
Say, did our neighbors disturb your nap? I'll speak to them about it.
Say, what's up? This sounds worse than what we went through yesterday.
I'm afraid it is, Russell. Our advance patrol reports that the Germans are moving up with 3 companies of infantry and 2 tank columns.
And the tanks are executing a pincer's movement.
Hey, Russell, here. Have a look through this window.
Okay.
See that ridge a mile across there?
Yeah, I see it.
Well, use your glasses.
Okay.
Now then, see those dark objects silhouetted against the east?
Oh, yeah.
Well, brother, those are German tanks.
Hey, they're too close for comfort.
You're right. And you needn't look now, but there are more of them north of us. And there are snipers and machine gun emplacements to the south.
To make the situation even stickier, German tanks and machine guns are laying down their fire to the rear, between us and the British artillery emplacements to the west.
Well, sir, what do we do?
Our tanks are moving up to attempt to push the German line back. We have excellent support from the British artillery to the rear. We'll stick, of course, and hope for reinforcements. But unless they arrive today, it's hard to say what may happen.
We stuck through another day of hell. The Stukas pounded us unmercifully. Shells screamed overhead. The rattle of machine gun fire and snipers' bullets filled every lull in the bombings. Fragments from high explosive bombs stripped the trees at Stuka Acres of all foliage. Our tanks turned back under the superior fire from enemy artillery. And I spent most of that day of terror huddled in a trench with Stoneman. When we dared to look up, we could see the bombs disgorging from their racks. Once we saw 2 hurtling straight toward us. We thought our numbers were up. We could hear bomb fragments whining just above our heads. At 9 o'clock that night, the commanding officer called a conference in the hut which served as his headquarters. He was eating his supper and talking with his officers as I entered the dim, candle-lighted room.
The enemy fire has subsided to the west. Oh, hello, Russell.
Hello, Captain. Commander.
Hello, Russell. I was just telling the captain that I agree with him that our advanced position here is untenable. Our lines are extended too thinly to cope with the force of the enemy. We must withdraw before he realizes the prize he's losing here.
No chance for reinforcement, huh?
And at present, none. But I wish to stress to all of you that this is not to be a general withdrawal. Our lines back of Tiboba are strong and will hold.
How soon do we leave?
As quickly as we can organize a convoy. Captain, what do your patrols report of the road to the rear?
It's a rough dirt track, a side road, leading back toward Meshes al-Bab. It appears to be the only way through the German ring.
I see. Does the enemy have it covered?
It was under fire from machine gun nests during the day, but our patrol reports it's comparatively quiet now.
I see. Needless to say, this is a dangerous task. We'll negotiate the distance. It's about 3 miles, isn't it, Captain?
About 3 miles, sir.
We'll negotiate that distance in complete blackout and in low gear. Take your time. If the noise of gunfire dies down enough to give us away, stop. We'll stay in close formation. You all know the rules of convoy driving. Any questions?
No, sir.
No, sir.
Let's get going. Come on.
The memory of that drive will stay with me always. Our trucks, automobiles, and Bren gun carriers crawled through the darkness, with everyone straining his eyes to see vehicles only a few feet in front. I drove at the start. But in a little over a mile, my eyes became so strained that I couldn't distinguish the outlines of the truck immediately in front of us. Stoneman drove the last half of the distance. Once during that tortuous drive, a single sniper's bullet whined out of the dark, barely missed our windshield. Well, we completed the 3 miles in something over 3 hours. By then, every man was exhausted from strain. It was raining. We threw ourselves down under an olive grove and slept. We didn't care about the cold and discomfort. Following morning at dawn, the press contingent set out for the nearby village of Wedzarga, where we learned we could file our rain-soaked dispatches at a field headquarters. From there, they could be relayed to London and New York.
Russell's dispatches gave the public his brilliant personal account of his experiences in one of the most fiercely fought engagements of the African campaign. And to the end of his story, Russell added this summation of his 73-hour visit to Stuka Acres.
I'm resting here at Wedzarga a couple of days till I can go back to Taburba with our reinforcements. But from here out, I'm working on borrowed time.
Ned Russell, whose story you have just heard, is one of hundreds of United Press correspondents who are facing danger, risking capture or death at the battlefronts around the world to report at first hand today's tremendous events. We will present another program in this series in the near future. Be sure to listen. And meanwhile, remember to listen for United Press News on the air. Look for United Press News in your favorite newspaper. It is your guarantee of the world's best coverage of the world's biggest news. Soldiers of the Press. This week, bombers over Haiphong.
Operational for Sunday. Order issued from Bomber Command to 15th Bombardment Group. To all staff and squadron commanders. A raid in force will be made on the Japanese-held port of Haiphong. Clearing airdrome at 0700. Signed, Brigadier General Claire Chenot.
That operational was of exceptional interest to United Press staff correspondent Robert P. Martin, assigned to a U.S. Army Bomber Command headquarters base in China. This is his eyewitness account of the first great raid on Haiphong, the strongest naval base in Jap-held Indochina.
From an advanced base in Yunnan, I flew with a group of American bombers when they sank their first ocean-going Japanese vessel from this base and then plastered the entire waterfront of Haiphong. It was 0600 when we piled out of bed for the final briefing. 6 o'clock in the morning. We had to feel our way into the blacked-out headquarters building where the last discussion of the raid was to be held. I just barely managed to get a cup of coffee under my belt before the briefing started.
You awake yet, Bob?
Just about. I don't see why you guys can't arrange to hold this war at a more civilized hour.
I'll speak to the general about it. You better grab yourself a seat. We're going to start. All right, gentlemen. We'll start now. Be seated.
Ta-da!
I'll have to presume that most of you are awake. I don't hear any snoring. But just to make certain that you stay awake, I'll ask you to take notes. Now, we discussed the preliminary details last night, so I needn't go over the formation again. However, let me review briefly. The first squadron will form the leading element of the group formation. The Hellcat squadron will form the second element, and the Top Hat squadron will form the rear element. That's you, Hank. No roving around looking for a fight. Now, combat orders. Group assembly after takeoff will be over reference point H at 5,000 feet. Wedge formation at 0710. The route out will be direct. Route back, direct. Method of attack will be Plan A. Base your altitude and command. Maneuver after attack. All squadrons turn right and assemble on group commander. Any questions?
What do we do if we get separated?
I'll get to that in a minute, Jinx. Now about the anti-aircraft evasive tactics. We can expect a certain amount of flak over such a...
The briefing went on for about half hour or so, and various reports kept coming in while we all sat there eating our breakfast with one hand and taking notes with the other. It's really amazing how much preparation and planning goes into a bomber raid, but it all pays off. Our bombers and their crews keep coming home as a result. Finally, the briefing was over. We knew when the commander said,
"Check your watches. In exactly 15 seconds, it'll be 0650. In 10 seconds. In 5 seconds. Check. All right. Good hunting. Good hunting. Let's go."
I was assigned to the big bomber of Lieutenant C.H. Hagan of Jacksonville, Florida. We had a brief conversation before going out in the flying field, and he told me what to watch for on our way to the target and during the bombing. Then we went aboard the bomber, and I was given a pair of earphones and allowed to plug in on the plane's interphone and radio circuit while the pilots warmed up the motors.
Radio testing. Army 49607 testing. Army 49607 testing. Can you hear me, tower? Can you hear me?
Yes, I hear you, 49607. I hear you very well. That frequency is very good.
Okay, thank you. Radio's hot, Skipper. Any time now.
Okay, Vince. Pilot to navigator. Everybody aboard?
Yes, Skipper.
Check off everybody, front to rear.
Bombardier here, sir.
Current, gunner here, sir. Navigator present.
Radio here, sir.
Navigator aboard, sir.
How about the press? You all set, Martin?
All set here.
Okay, thank you. Ready, co-pilot?
Ready. Oil pressure is up on both.
Okay. Unlock tail wheel. Stand by brakes. Pilot to radio. Transmit me.
Go ahead.
Control tower from Army 49607. Tower from Army 49607. Request taxi and takeoff clearance. Acknowledge.
Army 49607 from tower. Clear to taxi to number 1 runway. Take off when ready. Clear to taxi and take off. Go ahead.
We'll go. Roger. Hang on to your hat, Martin. We're on our way to Haiphong. It was a wonderful day for bombing Japs. The sunshine was brilliant. The sky was blue as it only can be over the arid China Mountains. The drone of the motors and the dull, endless landscape made me very drowsy. I must have been asleep for quite a while when the sound of voices in my earphones woke me up. Pilot to navigator, how we doing?
Okay. Right on course. Wind remains constant. Compass heading 22. No perceptible drift. ETA 20 minutes.
Right. The estimated time of arrival was 20 minutes. The bomber crew began to sit up and take notice. So did I. I moved over just below Gunner Sergeant Ed Rhodes of Kansas City and watched him checking over his machine guns. He handled them like a mother with a 2-week-old baby. Then he draped 50-pound belts of machine gun bullets around his neck like a pearl necklace. I had to move away because the loose ends kept swinging into my face. Pilot here. Keep a sharp watch for fighter opposition, everybody. Let me know if you see anything. I went back and watched the navigator, Lieutenant Olson Edgar Peck of Georgetown, Texas. He was putting away his instruments and settling behind another machine gun. He winked at me and patted the belts of ammunition.
Holy Joe on a fishing
Over my
trip.
earphones, I could
Why
hear the
didn't I
rear gunner
join the
swearing
Marines?
to himself from time to time. So I gathered that he also was trying to get comfortable behind a machine gun. Right about then, I began wishing I had a machine gun myself.
2 gangsters coming in fast from 6 o'clock underneath. Watch them, Charlie. I'll watch them. Tally-ho!
Gangsters are Jap pursuit ships, and angle 6 o'clock is directly astern. I flopped down in the passageway like a ton of brick and tried to remember if my insurance policy covered things like this.
Here he comes, Charlie. Give him a good one. I'm on him. Come on, Tojo. Come and get it. He's coming up to you. Hit him. Right. Left, pilot. Left a little. There, you son of a... Right in the kisses. There he goes. Looks very discouraged from here. Where's the other one, Charlie? He went further down the line, I think. Yeah, they got him. All clear, Skipper.
Nice work, you guys. We're coming in now. We'll be bombing from 20,000, so you better take some oxygen. Hey, Martin, is the United Press still with us? Yeah, I'm still here. Anybody want to trade a machine gun for a portable typewriter? In college, they always told me words were bullets. Better put on your oxygen mask now. We're going up, and you'll need some lung juice in your blood if we have to bail out. Okay, but give me a couple of weeks' notice before I have to jump, will you? I'll try. Stand by, everybody. I went back and stood by the bomb compartment so that I could look down and see what was underneath when the bomb doors opened. Pilot to bombardier. Leading element is moving to the left. They must be on. Can you see anything yet?
Yeah, Skipper, I can see the Haiphong waterworks about 3 miles ahead and to the left. Better get set.
Okay, take over. Bomb doors open. The heavy bomb doors swung open slowly. There, far below, I could see the waterfront of Haiphong. Then suddenly, the air was filled with little black puffs of smoke that went slowly drifting by. I realized the anti-aircraft flak batteries of the Japanese had gone into action. API is on. How do you want it, Bombardier?
As she goes. Altitude 20,000, check.
20,000, check.
Ground speed 170, check.
170, check. It's all yours. By now, the flak had become very thick, although I couldn't hear it at all. It looked as though it was quite far down and harmless. Now and then, brilliant tracer bullets went past silently like red ribbons in the sky. I could see that we were getting over the busiest part of the harbor.
Left 1-2 degrees, Skipper. Like that, that's fine. Steady. Right a trifle. Good. Steady. Steady. Bombs away.
I stood there beside the bomb racks and watched the big 500-pounders go streaming out silently and deadly. They almost seemed suspended in the air. I could see the little propeller on the tip of each bomb wind itself off the shaft, thus arming the bomb to explode on contact. For a while, they drifted along under the plane like little fish swimming in a bowl. Finally, I couldn't see them anymore. Then suddenly, there were great mushrooms of fire and smoke everywhere on the docks below. Then a roaring burst of flame and oily black smoke seemed to come almost up to our plane itself. And the concussion rattled us around like peas in a pod.
Must have been an oil tank. Nice shooting, Bombardier. All bombs gone?
All gone, Skipper.
Then what do you say we go down and shoot them up a bit? How about it, gunners?
That's for me, Skipper. Oh, boy.
Okay, hang on. Here we go.
I'd already had all the fun I wanted for one day, but the boys wanted to show me a good time, so we went down to a couple of 100 feet off the ground, went roaring up and down the waterfront, shooting everything in sight.
I'm forever going Left a little, Skipper. Forever going Look at the traces. Aren't they pretty little things, though? Remind me of the fireflies back in Jersey. Hey, Skipper, heel over a little and let me get a crack at that gunboat. That's fine. Hey, newspaper man, want to try a few rounds at the Japs?
No, thanks. I'll just watch. It's all right with you.
Okay, no skin off my back.
Went on like that for 20 minutes or so. By the time we got through, there wasn't much Jap equipment left in Haiphong Harbor without bullet holes in it. Finally, the ammunition began to run low, and the bombers headed for home. We were still 20 minutes away from our base when the starboard engine began to sputter. I'd been writing up my notes on the raid, but I suddenly decided to pay more attention to what was going on at the moment.
Pilot here. Stand by, everybody. We may be running into trouble. Radio, transmit me.
Go ahead, Skipper.
Red leader from Army 49607. Red leader from Army 49607. Acknowledge.
Army 49607 from Red Leader. Go ahead.
My number one engine is failing. Can't keep up with the formation. We'll try to come in, but may have to make emergency landing. See you later.
Okay, Army 49607. Keep horsing it. Good luck.
Thank you.
With that, we sparred off and went out of the formation. A mighty lonely feeling to see the other bombers gradually pull out of sight ahead. A fierce tropical storm shut down all around us. We were alone somewhere over North China, the most desolate country in the world.
Pilot here. All hands, put on parachutes and stand by to abandon ship.
The gas gauges weren't working properly, and the engines might cut out at any moment. We were flying blind by this time, and the ship was rocking from side to side in sudden flurries of rain and wind. No one said anything, but none of us felt too happy about the idea of jumping out into the gray blank that was everywhere below us.
Pilot here. I'm going down and try to find a hole in these cloud banks. I'll level off at 12,000 or less. And if we hit a clear spot, I'll try for an emergency. If I can't make it, I'll give you the word and you'll bail out. The newspaper man goes first. Good luck, everybody.
Good luck, sir. Good luck.
We went down slowly, trying not to lose any more altitude than we had to. The navigator helped me on with my parachute and checked the fastenings, then gave me quick instructions on what to do when I jumped. We shook hands.
Pilot here. Looks like a break in the clouds up ahead. Keep a sharp lookout, everybody. I'm going through.
Navigator to pilot. Hello, Skipper.
See anything, Oldie?
Yeah, I think so, Skipper. That crooked mountain. Isn't that our aerodrome landmark, the May West?
I think it is. Sure it is. We're home.
Hallelujah!
In a few moments, we could make out our base. We managed to get in before the gas ran out and the motors conked out completely. Hagen made a perfect landing, and when we crawled out of the ship, the boys who had gotten in ahead of us gathered around to wisecrack about walking home and to pound us on the back as a sign that they were glad to see us again. Before I started writing my account of the raid, I looked in on General Chenot in operations headquarters. He told me,
every plane returned safely from Haiphong. We hit the shipping where it hurt. It was a good show, Martin.
And it was a good story, too. Altogether, the bomber flight rained 14 tons of demolition bombs and incendiaries over the shipping and dock installations. One bomber, piloted by Lieutenant Colonel Herbert Morgan of Freedom, Pennsylvania, sank a 15,000-ton Jap ship. And between us, the rest of the flight managed to sink or damage several smaller ships. When we left Haiphong, we could see the fires we had started until we were 80 miles away. Yes, it was a good show. I'm glad I went along. I'll have to confess I'm also pretty well pleased about getting back.
Like Robert P. Martin, many United Press correspondents on every fighting front are braving gunfire or capture, facing tension, hardship, and danger. They carry no rifles or machine guns, these UP men, but their duty is as great and honorable as that of the fighting men they accompany. For their task is to get the news and send it back to their countrymen. We will be back soon with another story of these soldiers of the press. Be sure to listen. And meantime, listen for United Press news on the air. Look for United Press dispatches in your favorite newspaper. It is your guarantee of the world's best coverage of the world's biggest news.
Soldiers of the press. This week, a letter to Mrs. Marshall.
Oh, Ed, get me the New York office of the United Press on the telephone, will you?
You want anybody in particular, Bill?
Yeah, get me Ed Williams. He'll be able to tell me where Leo Disher is.
Leo Disher is in England, recovering from 15 bullet and shrapnel wounds received while covering the attack on Oran Harbor for the United Press. This is the story of a letter Leo Disher received not long ago and his answer to that letter. Our story begins on December 7th, 1942, 1 year after our defeat at Pearl Harbor, 1 month after our victory at Oran, Algeria. In the city room of the Augusta Chronicle in Georgia, an editor put through a telephone call to New York.
Hasn't that call to New York gone through yet?
Oh, yeah, it's on the pipe now, Bill. Pick it up.
Thanks. Hello, that you, Ed?
Yeah.
This is Bill Morris at the Augusta Chronicle. Best newspaper in the state of Georgia.
Oh, yeah, that's what you all say down there.
Okay, then I'll just skip the sales talk and come to the point. Where can I get hold of Leo Disher?
He's in England in a hospital. All right, what's up, Bill?
Oh, well, remember that story he filed from Oran?
Sure. Nice job of reporting.
You can say that again. It was a grand job. But here's what I'm getting at. One of the men he mentioned in the dispatch was Lieutenant Colonel George Frederick Marshall from Jacksonville, Florida.
I think I remember. He was the commanding officer of the Army men aboard the cutter that took Disher to Oran.
Yeah.
Marshall was killed in that action, wasn't that it?
That's right. Now, Mrs. Marshall, who lives here in Augusta, was in to see me today. She'd like to have some more information about her husband. You know, how he died.
Uh-huh.
I thought maybe Disher might be able to give her further details. Think so?
Probably. The only thing is, I don't know exactly where he is at the moment. You know how it is.
Yeah, guess you United Press men get around.
I'll tell you what, Bill. Have Mrs. Marshall write me a letter, and I'll send it along to Leo. It may take a little while, but sooner or later he'll get it. How does that sound to you?
Sounds okay. Fine.
A week or so later, United Press staff correspondent Leo Disher in London, England, received a large batch of communications from the New York office of United Press. One of the letters was marked urgent.
Open that one first, Harry. Might be a check.
No one in the memory of man has marked a check urgent. Only the guy that gets them feels that way.
Okay, little laughing boy. But open it up anyhow.
Let's see. Well, it's 2 letters. One is from the office. Dear Leo, the enclosed letter from Mrs. George Frederick Marshall.
Marshall?
Yeah. Is self-explanatory. We know you will want to answer it personally, so we're sending it along to you. Best regards and so on.
Let me have Mrs. Marshall's letter.
There you are. You want me to...
No. Go and take a smoke or something, Harry. Come back in 10 or 15 minutes, will you?
Yeah, sure, Leo. You yell if you want me, yeah?
Okay, Harry.
Dear sir, today I've been to see Mr. Bill Morris of the Augusta Chronicle, who suggested that I write you. My husband, Lieutenant Colonel George Frederick Marshall, was killed in action at Oran on November 8th. I've had no details whatsoever other than those in the enclosed articles written by your correspondent, Leo Disher. I realize that it is a great deal to ask, but I'm praying that you may be able to contact him. Even though he may not have any more first-hand information, he's probably in a position to find out for me exactly what took place. When in time our 2 little boys are old enough to be told, They will be very proud, and I should so like to be able to answer their questions. It's a very dreadful thing, and not to know makes it just a little bit harder. If you can find out anything for me, I shall appreciate it more than I can tell.
After reading Mrs. Marshall's letter, Leo Disher walked over to the window of his apartment and stood looking down at a quiet London park. He saw nurses wheeling baby carriages or stopping to talk to the policeman at the entrance. He saw a young man in an RAF uniform stop to light a cigarette. A young English girl in a WAPS uniform went by. She saluted the RAF officer, and they stood talking and laughing in front of Leo Disher's window overlooking the park. And all the time Disher looked out his window, he was hearing a voice that he had last heard during the attack on Iran.
Throw the grenades!
Harry. Harry! Yeah, Leo. Can I do something for you?
Yeah, I want to dictate a letter.
Okay. Go ahead.
It's to Mrs. George Frederick Marshall. Her address is in the letter on my desk there.
Right.
Dear Mrs. Marshall. You got that?
Well, sure.
Oh, yes, of course you have. Sorry. Yeah, this isn't going to be easy. Dear Mrs. Marshall. Oh, yes, you've got that. I believe, Mrs. Marshall, that I can help. When I got your letter this morning, I walked to the window and looked out over a quiet green park.
A quiet green park.
Oh, yes. But momentarily, I saw instead a night made hideous with flame and explosion. And I heard again a voice saying, "Throw the grenades." Yes, I saw your husband that morning when the black coast of Africa trembled. But it was not the first time I'd seen him.
Right this way, Mr. Disher. The captain will see you now, sir.
The first time was at a British port when I boarded the cutter taking us to Oran.
Good morning, Mr. Disher. Sit down, won't you? The others will be aboard directly.
2 American officers entered the captain's cabin. One was lean and bronzed, almost too young for the colonel's insignia on his shoulders.
Mr. Disher, I'd like to have you meet Colonel Marshall. How do you do, Mr. Disher?
Oh.
And Lieutenant Cole of the United States Army.
Glad to know you. How do you do?
Now make yourselves comfortable, gentlemen, while I see that all your equipment is loaded aboard.
If you don't mind, Captain, I'd like very much to go along with you. There are several details I'd rather look after personally.
Why, certainly, Colonel Marshall.
Your husband spoke with a crisp authority that made me forget he was only 31. Later I said to Lieutenant Cole, "He seems awfully young for a colonel."
Yeah, but he's one of the best. I'd follow him anywhere.
I saw your husband again at Gibraltar, Mrs. Marshall. And later, as we pushed across the Mediterranean, he told me something about how he was graduated from West Point.
Afterwards, I married a beautiful girl.
And how he had a wife and 2 boys back in the States.
Here's a picture.
Beautiful girl.
Isn't she? And this is our oldest boy, Ricky. He's going on 3 now.
He's big for his age, isn't he?
Yeah, he's a fine boy. We have another one now, 6 months old. I haven't got a picture of him yet. I imagine there'll be one when we get back from this raid. My wife says he looks just like me. Poor kid.
We kept talking about back home until he had to go down to the wardroom to meet with other officers to work out final plans to break the boom at Oran Harbor.
If you're ready, gentlemen. Now, this is our plan. The attack will begin at 0300. A British cruiser lying offshore will fire rockets to divert attention from us. Now, we'll go in and crash the harbor boom. Afterwards, we're to land and disrupt the harbor installation and capture any French vessels we can find at the docks. Now, is that clear?
Question, please. Well, we aren't able to crash the boom.
If that happens, gentlemen, a few prayers from all concerned would be of great assistance. Now, seriously, I've just received a piece of information that may indicate more trouble than we had at first anticipated. Now, there's a cruiser-type warship in the harbor. Now, that means big guns and lots of them. Yes, quite. However, I've made a plan which may or may not work. If the cruiser fires on us when we're past the harbor boom, we'll board her with machine guns and grenades. If we can neutralize her fire in that manner, our mission will be successful. If not, God have mercy on us all.
It was then I began to understand what he intended to do, Mrs. Marshall. We had been surprised to learn that there was a cruiser in the harbor. That meant there would be heavier guns than we expected. But the colonel calmly described his bold plan to board the enemy warship with grappling irons and to capture it with machine guns and grenades in order to clear the way to the American assault on the harbor. There's a paragraph in your letter, Mrs. Marshall, saying you may not have first-hand information, but perhaps you can find out some of the details. Yes, I can tell some details. I remember how your husband climbed the ladder to the bridge just before the attack. He was carrying a Tommy gun under his arm. He stood beside me and pulled out his service automatic from its holster.
Yeah. Take this, Mr. Disher. If I need it later, I'll yell for it.
Okay, Colonel.
How we doing, Captain?
Well, about 1.5 miles to go. Won't be long now. Our course is 055, standard compass. Course 4, speed 12 knots.
Think we can hold that?
I don't know, Colonel. This is an awful tub, but our engineer assures us that our engines will get us to our destination.
Very well. Carry on, Captain. Lieutenant Cole, get the men ready.
Yes, sir. How much left rudder are we carrying now, Coxswain?
5 degrees left rudder, sir. Steering right for 055.
Well, keep it at that. Quartermaster.
Yes, sir.
Have the rangefinder give us 100-yard reading.
Aye, aye, sir. Rangefinder, train on harbor and give 100-yard reading. Aye, aye. Range is now 1,500.
Is the public address system working, Captain?
Why, yes, Colonel. The speaker's cut in.
Men, going in now. Stand by, please, and wait for orders. You all know your assigned tasks. When I give the word, go in and do your job like soldiers. And may God bless you all.
Range is now 1,400 yards.
Correspondents.
Both engines ahead, full!
We're approaching the boom. All men below deck, lie down.
You know the main facts of the story. How we plunged against the harbor boom, hoping the French wouldn't open fire, but they did. You know how we were trapped, how our ammunition began exploding, how the guns of the warships in the harbor raked our little ship. There's a paragraph in your letter, Mrs. Marshall, that I read many times, saying, when in time our 2 boys are old enough to be told, they will be very proud, and I should so like to be able to answer all their questions. Yes, Mrs. Marshall, they will be very proud. And you can tell them their father, who was a slim, straight silhouette against the red flames of the guns. You can tell them that when he gave the order to throw the grenades, to attack a warship with hand grenades, his voice was calm above the chatter of his machine gun.
Stand by. Stand by to throw the grenades. Yes, sir. Captain, bring us alongside the cruiser. Get beneath the gun.
We'll be blown out of the water.
We'll be blown out if we don't go in. Bring us alongside, sir. Stand by! Boarding parties away. Throw the grenades.
You can tell your sons, Mrs. Marshall, that their father kept stabbing back until the last, while the flames of our burning ship broke around him and shells tore away pieces of the bridge where he stood, striking back against guns so close that, well, it almost seemed we could touch them. You need never fear the boys' questions, Mrs. Marshall. You can tell them that their father tackled a job of greatest importance to the success of our armies, and that he never quit fighting against impossible odds, and that he never struck the ship's colors. I'm glad Bill Morris suggested that you write to me, and I hope this letter may help a little. But it's wrong for you to say you're asking a great deal of me, Mrs. Marshall. You are the one of whom a great deal was asked, and proudly given. You and a great many others at home. Yours sincerely, Leo Disher.
Leo Disher is one of a corps of United Press correspondents whose privilege it is to record the heroic deeds of our fighting men on the war fronts. In fulfillment of this assignment, these soldiers of the press share the dangers of soldiers in arms. And because in our democratic way of life, war correspondents do see at first hand the actions they report, the free peoples of the world are today the best informed. We will be back next week with another program of Soldiers of the Press. Be sure to listen. And meanwhile, listen to United Press News on the air. Look for United Press dispatches in your favorite newspaper. They are your guarantee of the world's best coverage of the world's biggest news. Soldiers of the Press. This week, a son of Bushido.
Search forward to 1500. Forward to 1500. Left 3 mils. Left 3. All batteries 1 round. High explosive. Ready on 1 round. HE. Fire! Fire! Up 4 turn. Up 4. Fire! Fire!
This week, we present another eyewitness story of United Press staff correspondent Robert C. Miller with the American forces in the jungles of Guadalcanal. Miller landed with the 1st Marines to hit the beach at Guadalcanal some months ago. He stayed with them all during the difficult opening phases of the death struggle with the Japanese for possession of Henderson Field and the surrounding terrain. Later, he went back to the jungle again to cover the progress of the army which relieved the Marines. This is his story.
I was up at the crack of dawn today. It's hard to sleep when Gunnery Sergeant Alfred McKee is getting the range of the Japs. All the while I was shaving, I could hear his mortars searching through the jungle for Jap positions. He shook them up a bit as an official notification that the war wasn't over yet, and then knocked off for breakfast.
Pass me the sand, Chummy. Ah, thanks.
Pretty quiet this morning, huh?
Yeah. Those monkeys out there must be running out of ammo. Hardly ever shoot back anymore.
I'm not complaining.
I don't know. Helps to pass the time away when they shoot back. Hey, Cookie!
Yeah?
What thing kitchen side make lunch today?
Can that pigeon English now? My eyes don't slam.
Okay. What do you got for lunch today?
Target pay.
Target base, huh? Well, let's see. That's cream chip beef, isn't it?
Yeah. Personally, I'd just as soon have a couple of Jap snipers potting at me as eat any more of that stuff. With the Japs, you got at least a 50-50 chance of surviving. That target paste is Widowmaker from way back. Well, I'm glad we're going raiding up the coast.
On Guadalcanal, it's the accepted custom to grouse about the food, no matter what it happens to be. I must confess I was just a bit tired of eating cream chip beef myself. So when Captain Callahan invited me to accompany the raiding force up the coast beyond Lunga Bay, I accepted with more than my customary alacrity.
Wouldn't be surprised, Miller, if we saw some action today. We've got the 224th Jap Infantry Regiment bottled up in there beyond Tassafaronga. They must be getting desperate.
Sergeant McKee said something about they're running low on ammunition.
Yeah, our patrols say that the Japs in the jungle are assigning 2 and 3 men to each rifle. Now, that's a pretty good sign that they're on their last legs. Anyhow, you get your stuff together and meet us down at the boats. We'll be shoving off in about 5 minutes.
Okay. I went back to my tent and gathered up my field equipment and took a few grains of quinine. Then, as I always do when leaving the tent for any length of time, I put my typewriter carefully away in my private foxhole. Typewriters are as scarce as women on Guadalcanal, and there aren't any women. After I finished the chores, I went down to the assault boats. A quarter hour later, we were on our way up the coast.
Come on.
I found myself in the same boat with Sergeant McKee and his mortar crew, and a tough bunch they were, too.
Okay, you guys.
We were pretty cramped for room in the boat, and the sergeant had things to say to anybody who did much moving around.
Get off my foot, you knucklehead! And sit down, you're rocking the boat.
Okay, don't crowd your blood pressure. I was only trying to get my circulation back.
Well, what's the matter with your circulation? You got hardening of the arteries or something that you have to walk up and down like this was a promenade deck of the Queen Mary?
My foot's asleep.
His foot's asleep. Now ain't that tough? Ain't that awful? You go right ahead, Sonny. Walk right up and down the middle of my stomach all you want. We mustn't let your foot go to sleep and you get gangrene or something. Go ahead, walk on my stomach. I'll understand. His foot's asleep. What an army. We come practically halfway around the world. Well, I'll be a...
What's the matter, Sergeant?
My foot's asleep.
The assault boats aren't the most comfortable things in the world when they're overloaded as ours was. We were mighty glad when we turned in and headed for the beach. It was almost noontime by then, and everybody began opening his field ration kit and grabbing a quick lunch.
All right, not too fast, you guys. Don't eat too fast. All right. I told you once, I told you 1,000 times. Those rations can knock you out if you eat them too fast.
I've actually seen men keel over in a dead faint from gobbling the highly concentrated food capsule. So I went slow and easy with mine. It tasted good.
Better than target paste any day, huh, Millie?
You aren't kidding, Sergeant.
Down! Watch it. Get your heads down or you'll get them blown off.
Looks like there's a reception committee waiting for us, Sergeant.
Yeah. And I'm the guy that said they were running out of ammunition.
Well, what are you going to do?
I'm going to finish my lunch. That's what I'm going to do.
As we got nearer the beach, the Japs evidently decided that the neighborhood was getting too crowded and moved out. Machine gun fire slacked off and then stopped. Except for the occasional high-pitched note of a sniper's rifle, there wasn't any real opposition to our landing. We came in with a rush the last 100 yards, and the boat drove into the shallow water and grounded with a wallop that loosened all my back teeth and sent me head over heels into the bottom of the boat, right onto the sergeant.
Oh, why didn't I join the Navy?
I'm sorry, Sarge. I hope I didn't hurt you.
Oh, certainly not. I enjoyed it. Nothing like having a UP correspondent on your midriff to settle a man's stomach. Look, just get off my foot now, will you? Thanks.
We went ashore and cut our way inland through the jungle until we reached a small hill. There we took up positions and dug in. While the sergeant and his men were setting up their heavy mortars, I went over and watched Captain Callahan carefully checking his maps against the surrounding terrain. Hello, Captain. Mind if I watch?
Oh, no, of course not. Here, I'll show you. Now, this is our position, marked right over here.
Huh?
Now, these are our main lines where we just came from, back here.
Oh, yeah, I see.
Then, off to the right on the map is our objective. And now, if you look up ahead there, you can just about make out the real thing. There, just beyond that fringe of palm trees.
I don't see anything. Just jungle.
Well, I hope it's more than jungle. There, do you notice that little clearing is a sort of a plantation?
Uh-huh.
Well, just beyond it, to the left, there where the jungle seems especially heavy. Do you see it?
Yes, but what about it?
Well, there's a gully there that the Japs have been using as a command post. Our reconnaissance planes spotted it yesterday. The Japs evidently took a bath. But they made the mistake of hanging their underwear on the bushes to dry, and our planes spotted it. And now we're going to give them a real cleaning. You ready with the mortar, Sergeant?
Yes, sir.
Commence when ready. Reference point is head of gully. Search forward.
Number 1 mortar. Deflection 0. Range 750. 2 rounds, HE. Deflection 0. 750. Ready on HE. Fire! Fire! Down 4 turns. Down 4 turns. Fire! Fire!
Now everybody stood watching the dark patch of jungle through the palm trees, waiting for the mortar shells to hit. Then suddenly we saw the blossom of smoke and debris from the first shell, and an instant later...
First one was right on, sir.
Continue.
All batteries, up 4 turns. Searching forward to 1,000. HE, commence firing. Commence firing.
First and second machine gun squads. Range 750. Sight on stake. Reference point for number 1, head of gully to crooked palm tree. Number 2, crooked palm tree to clearing. Commence firing.
The barrage kept up for an hour. The Japs made several attempts to return our mortar fire, but each time their batteries were quickly knocked out by the steady stream of high explosive the sergeant and his men were pouring into their positions. A little later, the captain set up a portable loudspeaker system, and our interpreter began calling upon the Japs to surrender.
Osan Hiro, Osan Hiro, Chokomotsumo, Yalaruso, Tabakomo, Osan Hiro. Surrender. It is useless to resist any further. Surrender, and we will feed you, clothe you, and give you cigarettes. Surrender now, before it is too late. Osan Hiro.
Nothing happened for a while. The captain had signaled the mortars and machine guns to slacken fire, which they had done. Still nothing happened. The captain told our interpreter to try once more.
Osan Surunoa, Imarazo. Surrender now or never. Surrender now. Osan Surunoa, Imarazo.
All right, Sergeant. Pour it into them.
The barrage started up again, even heavier than before. Evidently, it was too much for the Japs. A few moments later, a group of them came walking toward our lines with their hands held high in surrender.
Cease firing!
Cease firing!
Yeah, looks like they couldn't take it.
Well, it's too soon to be sure. Might be a trick. They're capable of anything. Machine gun squads, train on advancing enemy forces. Stand by.
But it wasn't a trick. The Japs were really surrendering. For the first time in 1,000 years, Japanese soldiers were violating the warrior code of their country and giving themselves up in battle. It was an exciting haul and a good day's work, and my first big story since returning to Guadalcanal. I rode back to camp on the boat carrying the prisoners. The Australian interpreter gave me their story on the way.
What is this, Scott? 私は笠本明吉です。フィリピン、シナおよびマレー半島で激戦しました。年は23です。
This one says he's Private Asamoto Akiyoshi. He's 23 years old. Says he fought in China, the Philippines, and on the Malayan Peninsula.
私たちは荒野第224連隊の所属です。
They're from the 224th Jap Infantry Regiment. Crack outfit. They've been decorated by the Emperor.
Does he say why he surrendered?
I'll ask him. Naze, ko san shita no ka?
私たちは一期少佐指揮のもとに8月の上旬、テノール川で激戦しました。5日間食わず飲まずです。ほとんど全滅です。
He says they haven't eaten for 5 days. Says that his outfit came here early in August. Many of them were killed in the landing. Later, he was under Colonel Ichiki at the Battle of the Tenaro River. Ichiki's battalion was almost wiped out.
一期少佐は連隊機を焼却の後、名誉の殺を遂げられました。
Yes, well, he's telling how Colonel Ichiki burned the regimental flags and then shot himself because of the disgrace of being defeated. They were pretty badly cut up at the Tenaro.
Yeah, I remember. I was there. Many of them got out alive. Those that did had to swim for it.
なかなか正確です。
He says that they were told that the Americans on Guadalcanal would be easy to defeat. And he says they were not told about American artillery, which was a complete surprise and which killed and wounded so many of them. He says they couldn't escape from it.
Why is he pointing at your rifle?
睡眠不足およびタバコ、食料の欠乏です。普段の砲撃には全く耐えられませんでした。
He says American riflemen can always hit the target and are better shots than the Japanese. He says the constant shelling and rifle fire from the American lines has shot up their best outfits. He says they surrendered to get some food and tobacco, but most of all to get some relief from the constant barrage.
Poor devils, I almost feel sorry for them.
Yeah, so did I, until I found this.
What is it?
A souvenir one of the prisoners was wearing, from the Philippines. An American soldier's identification bracelet.
We got back to camp just at twilight and created quite a sensation with our prisoners. Hashimoto and his fellow soldiers were given liberal portions of cooked rice. And the way they pitched into it, I could believe they hadn't eaten anything for 5 days. Afterwards, they were given cigarettes and clean clothing to replace their jungle-torn rags. Hashimoto conducted himself with military bearing and apologized for his appearance when he was photographed. Then they were all taken away to prisoners' camp. The excitement over capturing them died down. Finally, we went in for supper just in time for a real treat. The cook had saved us some creamed chip beef.
Like Robert Miller, other men of the United Press are standing beside our troops on every fighting front. They go into battle with them aboard our warships and our bombers to see with their own eyes the actions of which they write. Your local announcer will tell you when you may hear the next in this series of programs, dramatizing the experiences of the men of UP. Be sure to listen. And meanwhile, look for United Press dispatches in your favorite newspaper. Listen for United Press news on the air. It is your guarantee of the world's best coverage of the world's biggest news.
That was the first part of the Soldiers of the Press. That is about it for this episode of Airchecks. The next episode will be the second part, which will eventually bring closure of World War II in the USA. Airchecks is a 3-hour podcast uploaded every Saturday and Sunday. See you on the same time and same channel.